Chapter 36:16. At first he was not willing to learn, but Lisa forced him to learn. After all, he often went to war zones. If there was an accident, she could not be by his side to protect him. If he was injured, basic bleeding control could save his life. Wuxia saw Yun Shishir's worried expression and immediately comforted her. "Don't worry, it's just a simple scratch. It's nothing serious. It's good that you're okay." Yun Shishir sat in front of him, still in a state of shock. She wiped away her tears and heaved a sigh of relief as she finally calmed down. The police arrived quickly. With the clues provided, they immediately sneaked into the hotel and checked the rooms one by one. Finally, the attacker in a room on the 15th floor was killed on the spot. When they entered the room, everyone was shocked. The room had become an armory. There were AK-47s, machine guns, pistols, and even grenades that were not thrown out in time. It was hard to imagine how terrifying the situation would be if grenades were thrown into such a dense crowd. At that time, the number of casualties would probably increase by several times. The specific reason for the attack would have to wait until the case was filed for investigation. However, this was probably the most violent social terrorist incident in a long time. In the huge square, there were countless casualties. Preliminary estimates put the number of casualties in the hundreds. In the past, there had never been such a bad public security incident. The law in the country strictly controlled firearms. It was illegal to carry a gun. Ordinary criminals did not have such channels to get their hands on guns. This attack had never happened before. Yun Shishir called Gong Jia. Gong Jia handed Yue Yao to the nanny and drove over. However, the square was heavily congested with traffic. All the vehicles had to make way for the police cars and ambulances. There were more than 10 ambulances that were constantly transporting the injured. Cries, sobs, and screams were still incessant. Yun Shishir looked at the square through the railing. From afar, she could see that the ground was in a mess. Many light sticks were scattered on the ground, drink bottles, cans, and many corpses were scattered on the ground, as well as the wailing injured. It was hard to imagine that not long ago, this place was peaceful. Music, beer, light sticks, cheers, and screams. Now it had become hell on earth. Hundreds of corpses were piled on the ground, and blood flowed like a river. Yun Shishir had never seen such a scene before. She still felt that this was a complete nightmare. The scene was cordoned off and maintained. Yu also stared blankly, unable to react for a long time. This accident, without the need for an official announcement, had already been defined as a bad shooting. How could this be? How could this be? The tragic cries still echoed in his ears. For the first time in her life, Yu felt that weapons could bring about such a terrifying hell. They were considered lucky. If they weren't lucky enough, it would be him or mommy or Wuxia. Perhaps it was one of the corpses in the square. For the first time in his life, he hated guns. This was something that could only bring death. In her mind, she suddenly recalled the words he had said in the past. "I want all the wars in this world to end because of me, and to be born because of me." But what was before them was war. However, after experiencing death for themselves, perhaps only then did they realize how terrifying death and war were. Chapter 36:17. Gong Jia finally arrived at the scene. When Yun Shishir saw him, she walked over and said to Gong Jia, "Xiao Jia, your brother-in-law is injured. Hurry up and send him to the hospital." "What's going on?" Gong Jia did not know what had happened. When he arrived, he saw Yu standing alone at the side, looking at the cordoned-off square. Her back view looked lonely and bleak. Yun Shishir was guarding Wuxia. Not long ago, someone was shooting at the square with a gun. There were many casualties. Gong Jia questioned, "Where's the ambulance? I saw many ambulances coming here." Yun Shishir shook her head and said, "There are too many injured people. Those who are seriously injured take priority." Wuxia was only grazed, so the ambulance only bandaged him. Yun Shishir was extremely anxious. Even though Wuxia kept comforting her, saying that it was just a small injury and that it was not a big deal, but she was very anxious. Gong Jia checked Wuxia's injury. It was indeed a small injury. Once the bleeding stopped, it would not be a big deal. A graze from a bullet would not leave any scars. He also said, "Shishir, don't worry too much. I've taken a look. It's really a small injury." Seeing that Gong Jia also said so, Yun Shishir was relieved. When Muyaja said that it was a small injury, she thought that he was afraid that she would be worried and comforted her, so he said that. Gong Jia understood the situation and was a little surprised when he found out what had just happened. The security in Beijing is very good. Why would there be a shooting incident for no reason? Yun Shishir was also confused. Yu suddenly turned around and said coldly, "It's probably to take revenge on society." When Gong Jia heard this, he did not say much. He only said, "Get in the car. Even if it's just a minor injury, it still needs to be treated as soon as possible." Muyaja nodded and stood up. He said to Gong Jia, "Don't go to the big hospital in the city center. There are a lot of injured people there. With this wound, any hospital will do." All right. The three of them got into the car, and Gong Jia drove them to a relatively remote area. They randomly found a medium-sized hospital. The way in was very congested, but the way out was much wider. The ambulance prioritized sending the injured to the nearest hospital. Therefore, the few big hospitals near the city center were all overcrowded. In comparison, although this hospital was a little out of the way, it was fortunate that there were not many people. Soon the queue was filled. While Muyaja was treating his wounds, Yu bumped into Gu Jinglian again in the corridor. Who would have thought that the two of them would be so fated to be admitted to the same hospital? Gu Jinglian was not injured. The one who was injured was Lin Shi. When he was leaving with the crowd, he got a small cut on his arm by a fallen railing. He needed a few stitches. When the two of them met again, Gu Jinglian did not expect that Yu would be safe and sound. When he saw Yu running against the crowd to the center of the square, he thought that he must have been killed. Even if he could dodge the bullets, he would not be able to dodge the crowd. He was afraid that he would suddenly fall and be trampled by the crowd. There were so many injured people. Some of them were shot by the bullets while most of them were trampled by the crowd when they fell. Some of them were not injured, but many of them were trampled to death when they fell in the crowd. When Gu Jinglian saw Yun Shishir sitting behind Yu, he immediately understood why he was in such a hurry to come back. He was looking for someone. Chapter 36:18. He did not expect the cold and heartless child to have such a soft side. Gu Jinglian was a little surprised. When Yu saw Gu Jinglian, he lowered his head and did not say anything. Gu Jinglian crossed his arms. "Why don't you recognize me?" When Yun Shishir heard the voice, she looked up and saw Gu Jinglian. Her eyes widened in surprise. She recognized him. Gu Jinglian, the head of the Gu family in Beijing. He was also Gu Xingzi's elder brother. Why was he here? Yu suddenly stood up and walked in front of him. He said coldly, "If there's anything, don't talk about it here." With that said, he tugged at his sleeve and led him to a corner. When he turned around, Yu's gaze was filled with hostility. "Gu Jinglian, what exactly is it that you're haunting me like a ghost?" Gu Jinglian crossed his arms in front of his chest calmly. "What do I have to do with you, Gong Fan? We haven't settled the score between us yet." "What score?" "The matter in North Africa is not something that can be forgotten so easily," Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly. "Werther is the core of the Gu family in North Africa. You used those despicable methods to take it away from me. How are we going to settle this score?" "Despicable?" Yu did not think much of it. He said faintly, "Gu Jinglian, don't make yourself sound so noble. I don't need to mention how you got that piece of land in Werther, right? That piece of land in Werther used to belong to Hurricane. In order to get that piece of land, the Gu family did not necessarily use honorable methods. Now, he was saying that he was despicable? So what? He only looked at the results and did not ask about the process. Gu Jinglian sized him up silently. Suddenly, he squatted in front of him and said slowly, "I have to say you're really impressive to have such skills at such a young age. However, I did lose the matter in North Africa. I have no objections. However, I hope that you won't go against me in the future." He paused for a moment and said with some difficulty, "After all, you're just a child. If I'm too harsh on you, I'll be going too far." The boy's lips curled into a smile when he heard that. "I also hope that you won't go against me. Otherwise, I will also feel very embarrassed to have you suffer so much." The two of them had similar auras, so it was difficult to determine who was superior. Gu Jinglian's thin lips twitched slightly. The capital city had always been a place of strife. and there had never been a lack of open and veiled struggles. However, since Muyaja married Yun Shishir, withdrew from the strife, and focused on his family, the Xingyu Financial Group's aggressive expansion had also been restrained a little. Without such a strong opponent, Gu Jinglian could not help but feel bored. Still, with a powerful up-and-coming talent like Yun Tianyu around, it would not be too boring for her. Gu Jinglian stood up, touched his head provocatively, and turned to leave. Yu Yu watched his back coldly and returned to Yun Shishir's side. At this time, Muyaja's wound had been treated. Seeing him appear out of nowhere, he asked suspiciously, "Where did you go just now?" Yu Yu turned his face away and did not say a word. It was as if he had returned to the day when he had just returned to the Mu family and locked himself in his own world, as if he was isolated from the world. Muyaja was stunned, but he smiled. He understood his son's character. He was arrogant, sharp-tongued, and insincere. Chapter 36:19. He heard Yu Yu calling him Daddy. He heard Yu Yu calling him Daddy. His heart was burning with anxiety. That was enough. At least it proved that his Yu Yu had never left. Muyaja suddenly hugged Yu Yu from behind and lifted him up. Yun Shishir saw this and couldn't help but say angrily, "You're injured and you're still so restless." However, Muyaja said, "It's nothing. It's just a small injury." He bent down and gently kissed Yu Yu's forehead. Yu Yu's face instantly heated up. He turned his face away awkwardly to avoid him. With an unnatural expression, he said, "What are you doing?" "Carrying my son." Muyaja saw that Yu Yu was blushing adorably. He lowered his voice and whispered in his ear, "Just now at the square you were so anxious to call me Daddy. Now you're acting as if you don't care. You're still the same as before, saying one thing and meaning another." Yu Yu looked even more uncomfortable. He struggled and said, "Let go of me." As he struggled slightly, Muyaja's face showed a hint of pain. "Ouch, it hurts." Yu Yu was nervous for a moment. He thought that his struggle had affected his wound. For a moment he didn't dare to move. Muyaja saw this and snickered in his heart. Beside him, Yun Shishir and Gong Jia looked at each other and snickered in their hearts. This proved that Yu Yu was still the same as before. Although he was awkward, he still knew how to care for others. On the island, the sea breeze danced. Muichin suddenly woke up from his nightmare. Outside the window, the sun was already shining brightly. It was a dream. He held his forehead with a headache. When he woke up just now, he had completely forgotten the contents of his dream. He only knew that in his dream, he seemed to be very sad and upset. He seemed to have dreamt of Yu Yu. Half a month had passed since she swapped identities with Yu Yu. However, he was still not used to everything on the island. Boredom, loneliness, solitude, desolation. Sometimes when Lisa was around, there was a companion. Although Lisa wasn't good with words and didn't like to talk, she didn't dare to start a conversation with Xiaoi Chen. She always acted indifferent. However, regardless of whether she liked to talk or not, at least she had someone to keep her company. When Lisa was not around, Xiaoi Chen had developed the ability to communicate with objects. Sometimes he would talk to himself while walking. Ask and answer questions to yourself. If he didn't do that, he wouldn't know how to prove that he was still alive. Apart from breathing, thinking, and talking, Xiaoi Chen felt like he was about to go crazy from boredom on this island. Lisa secretly gave him a tablet. With the tablet, when Xiaoi Chen was bored, he would play games on the tablet to pass the time. He downloaded a pet training game called Pet Manor. In the game, he could adopt pets, build a pet manor, raise pets, and even talk to them. After training, the pets could even understand his commands and respond accordingly. He had a French bulldog named Yu Yu and a ragdoll cat named Lisa. One day, Xiaoi Chen held the tablet and talked to Yu Yu. "Lie down." On the screen, the cream-colored French bulldog lay down obediently. It stuck out its tongue and tilted its head to look at him. Xiaoi Chen rubbed its round head and barked again. "Yu Yu." The bulldog barked in joy. Woof. Chapter 36:20. The bulldog barked in joy. Woof. What's 1 + 1? The bulldog hesitated for a few seconds and barked a few times. Xiaoi Chen continued. What's 3 + 9 to 4 + 15 to 80 + 2? The bulldog was stunned and looked at him in confusion. Xiaoi Chen was amused and laughed out loud. Look, you don't even know how to add and subtract such simple numbers. You always say that I'm an idiot, but I think you're the idiot. Idiot you. The bulldog understood the word idiot and lay on the ground weakly, revealing an innocent and pitiful expression. The ragdoll cat, Lisa, walked past Yu gracefully and curled up into a ball in the cat bed. Xiaoqin said again, Lisa, come here. The ragdoll cat licked her paws and turned her head lazily to look at him. However, she seemed indifferent and ignored him. Xiaoqin said unhappily, Lisa, come here. Be good and listen to me. Only then did the ragdoll walk gracefully to the screen and sit beside Yu, with a noble and inviolable look on her face. Xiaoqin said, lie down. Meow. Lisa meowed lazily but did not move. In this game, cats were the hardest to tame. Cats were arrogant, cold, clingy, indifferent, affectionate, and distant. They were especially hard to tame. So far, Xiaoqin had only learned one trick. Scratch him. Upon hearing this, Lisa turned around and swiped her claws at Yu. She was shockingly fierce. Ha ha ha. Xiaoqin was amused by this scene and laughed until he was rocking back and forth. When he looked up, he saw the real Lisa's cold face. Xiaoqin was scared out of his wits. He froze and did not dare to move. Lisa put the tablet on the table and asked in a neutral tone, Is it fun? It's okay. He scratched his face. Yeah, it's just to pass the time. Is this game very fun? Xiaoqin said awkwardly. It's okay, I guess. Lisa glanced at him expressionlessly and her gaze fell on the screen. That noble ragdoll cat. At least he knew what was good for him. She was set to be a ragdoll cat. If she was set to be a dog, she would scratch him. Xiaoqin complained. It's so boring to be alone in the castle. There's no one to play with me. Are you still a 3-year-old child? Do you still need someone to play with you? Although I'm not a 3-year-old, I'm still a kid. Xiaoqin tugged at Lisa's sleeve and begged. Lisa, play with me, okay? Let's go pick up seashells and make wind chimes. Gong Xiaoying will be here tomorrow, Lisa suddenly said. Xiaoqin's expression froze. He stared at Lisa in astonishment and said suspiciously, Didn't you say that Gong Xiaoying usually doesn't come here? That's under normal circumstances. Lisa continued. You haven't left the island for a long time and there hasn't been any news from you. Of course Gong Xiaoying will come and check on you. You have to remember that no matter what, you can't give yourself away when Gong Xiaoying comes tomorrow. What will happen if I give myself away? Xiaoqin thought to himself, this Gong Xiaoying is my grandfather after all. Even if I give myself away, he won't say that he will slit my neck with a knife, right? Lisa said, If my identity is exposed, I will die. Xiaoqin was speechless. Chapter 36:21. Xiaoqin was shocked. Would Lisa be in trouble if his identity was exposed? Gong Xiaoying was so cruel. It seemed like his grandfather was not cute at all. Xiaoqin felt wronged and said, I'm innocent. I don't care. Lisa grabbed him by the collar and said coldly, So I'm warning you, if you expose yourself, I won't let you off. Then, how can I not expose myself? Xiaoqin spread his hands and said, You and I talk like each other. How can he recognize us? It's fine if you don't talk, but once you do, you expose your IQ. After a pause, Lisa continued, How can a leader who founded the Hurricane Group be so stupid? Besides, do you think he doesn't know that your mommy gave birth to twins? Not only does he know, but he also knows the biggest difference between you and Yu. Yes, she admitted. Yu and Xiaoqin really looked alike. However, this did not mean that they would not be exposed in front of a sly old fox like Gong Xiaoying. Xiaoqin was curious and asked, What's the difference? Lisa said coldly, One is talkative, the other is quiet. He was caught off guard. Xiaoqin felt wronged. He did not think that he was a talkative person. Why did everyone say that he was talkative? Anyway, when he comes, you should talk less, eat less, and make less facial expressions. Oh. Xiaoqin did not understand. I can understand if you want me to talk less and make less facial expressions, but why should I eat less? Lisa said expressionlessly. Yu eats very little, he doesn't eat as much as you. Usually he only eats a few meals, but you ate 3 big bowls at once. It would be strange if he didn't suspect anything. Xiaoqian felt that what she said made sense. All right. He won't be here for long anyway. Although he won't be here for long, you can't let your guard down. Understand? Xiaoqian saluted and said lazily, Yes, sir. Isn't it just eating less, talking less, and making fewer expressions? I might as well lock myself in my room. Lisa raised her chin and said, In fact, Yu has always been like this. He rarely leaves his room, so when he comes you better stay in your room and don't go anywhere, okay? Got it. The next day, Xiaoqian woke up early and ate 2 big bowls of rice before Gong Xiaoying arrived. However, by noon, Gong Xiaoying was still nowhere to be seen. Could it be that he wasn't coming? Xiaoqian thought excitedly that it would be best if she didn't come. It would save him the trouble of pretending to be Yu. In the afternoon, while he was taking an afternoon nap, he vaguely heard the sound of the door closing. Then he heard Lisa and Alice's voices. Xiaoqian turned over and squinted his eyes. Lisa, is he here? Master, young Master Fan is still taking an afternoon nap. Lisa didn't answer him immediately but said this instead. Xiaoqian frowned and opened one of his eyes. However, he was surprised to see that the bed was surrounded by a crowd. He sat up in surprise, only to see Liza and Alice staring at him nervously and giving him meaningful looks. Xiaoqian snapped out of his daze and glanced at the other side of the bed. He saw a man in his 50s standing in front of the window. He was wearing a suit and a military-style waistcoat. He was tall and handsome, but when he looked at him, his aura was intimidating. Chapter 36:22. He recognized that this man with a strong aura was Gong Xiaoying, his grandfather. Little Li Chen immediately retracted his expression and put on an extremely cold expression as he stared at him in a daze. Gong Xiaoying looked at him and then at Alice. How's his condition? Alice immediately replied. He's almost recovered. After a year of recuperation, the functions of his organs are basically the same as a healthy person's. Xiaoqian lowered his head silently. His cold expression was no different from Yu's. Lisa's heart finally settled down. Gong Xiaoying came too suddenly. She had originally thought that something had happened at the last minute, so she cancelled her trip and wouldn't be coming. She didn't expect Gong Xiaoying to come so suddenly. She wasn't mentally prepared for it. Xiaoqian was taking an afternoon nap, so Gong Xiaoying asked to see Xiaoqian. She was worried that Xiaoqian would be in a daze and wouldn't be able to react in time, so she told him that he was resting. However, Gong Xiaoying insisted on seeing him. She couldn't stop him, so she led him into the room uneasily. Fortunately, Xiaoqian reacted quickly. Even though he had just woken up and was confused, he wasn't so muddle-headed that he would give himself away. Gong Xiaoying sat down on the side of the bed and said slowly, Why didn't you call me? Xiaoqian looked up at him, but his mind skipped a beat. Lisa didn't mention how you usually address Gong Xiaoying. Old master? Or grandfather? Lisa hurriedly said. Young Master Fan hasn't woken up yet. Gong Xiaoying laughed when he heard that. Even if he's still asleep, he can't have forgotten how to address me, right? Xiaoqian's heart suddenly felt uneasy. In the Gong family, etiquette was very important. When a junior met a senior, they would greet them. This was etiquette. Gong Xiaoying valued etiquette. Even the arrogant Gong Jia would have to greet his elders respectfully when he returned to Gong Xiaoying. There was a clear distinction between seniority and inferiority. Xiaoqian glanced at Lisa and noticed that she was clenching her fists nervously. For a moment he also felt uneasy. Outer. He called out tentatively while cautiously looking at Lisa to observe her expression. Seeing that Lisa did not express any strange attitude, he knew that calling him Grandpa was the right thing to do. Grandfather, he called out in a low voice. Gong Xiaoying smiled in satisfaction. He patted his head and asked gently, Are you still asleep? Xiaoqian lowered his head and nodded lightly. Gong Xiaoying smiled and said, Sleep a little longer. When Xiaoqian heard that, he felt as if he had been granted amnesty and fell straight onto the bed. He wished that he could avoid having to deal with Gong Xiaoying. It was simply a blessing that he could continue sleeping. This way he would not have to rack his brains to think of a way to not expose himself. Gong Xiaoying lowered his body and covered him with the blanket. Then he stood up and walked out of the room. Before Lisa left, she whispered in his ear, Yu is very respectful to old master. You must not give yourself away. Okay. Lisa then left with a peace of mind. Xiaoqian lay in bed until night time. When it was dinner time, he could no longer escape. Xiaoqian then left the room and walked into the dining room. At that moment, everyone was seated at the table, including Gong Xiaoying. Chapter 36-23. However, he pretended to be calm as he walked to the table and sat down. He picked up his cutlery and buried his head in his food. Gong Xiaoying suddenly put down his cutlery and asked, "Some time ago, you took over Werther's piece of land. I didn't expect you to be able to take it back from Gu Jinglian. You're not simple." Xiaoqian was stunned but didn't say anything. Gong Xiaoying continued, "The factories on that piece of land will probably all be leveled soon. When do you plan to carry out the experiment that you came up with?" Xiaoqian was speechless. Experiment? What was an experiment? What was Werther? Gong Xiaoying said a bunch of terms that he didn't understand. This? How could he possibly answer this? How was he supposed to answer? Didn't they say that it would be fine as long as he ate less, spoke less, and made fewer expressions? How was he supposed to answer such a difficult question? Xiaoqian looked up blankly and looked at Lisa. However, he saw that she was holding her forehead and looked like she was having a headache. She also didn't expect that Gong Xiaoying would come this time to discuss the issue of the North African experimental base with her. Xiaoqian was speechless as he cut a piece of steak. He took a bite and swallowed it with difficulty. Seeing that Gong Xiaoying was staring at him, he elegantly wiped his mouth with a wet towel and said calmly, "I don't have any leads yet." Gong Xiaoying was speechless. Lisa was speechless. Alice choked on her dry red wine. Gong Xiaoying said suspiciously, "You were the one who suggested this experimental base. How can you say that you don't have any leads?" Xiaoqian's expression didn't change, but his back kept breaking out in cold sweat. Alice was worried that the matter would be exposed and quickly poked her head with her finger. When Xiaoqian saw this, he instantly realized that Alice must be hinting at something. But what did she mean by poking her head? Xiaoqian also poked his own head and suddenly said, "Is there something wrong with your head?" Alice raised her head in shock and stared at him in horror. Lisa's eyes were wide open. She did not expect Xiaoqian's comprehension ability to be so terrible. Gong Xiaoying was also stunned. What? What did he mean by there was something wrong with his brain? Alice face-bombed, looking like she was having a headache. When Xiaoqian saw this, he finally understood what she meant. He held his forehead and pretended to have a headache. Lisa immediately stood up and pretended to be worried as she walked over to his side and held his shoulder. "Young Master Fan, does your head hurt again?" "It hurts." Xiaoqian pretended to be patient and took a deep breath. "My head hurts." Lisa immediately looked at Alice worriedly. The latter also reacted. "Is it a reaction to the drug?" Gong Xiaoying looked at them suspiciously. "Headache," Alice explained. "Some drugs will have a backlash effect and some strong side effects. It will stimulate the central nervous system of the brain and cause headaches." She was talking nonsense with a straight face, but Gong Xiaoying actually believed her. Alice and Lisa immediately helped Xiaoqian up the stairs. When they were halfway up the stairs, Alice could not wait to take him away. She almost carried him away. When they reached the room, Alice asked her assistant to stand guard outside the door, while she and Lisa dragged Xiaoqian into the room. Xiaoqian turned around and said, "Didn't I tell you not to talk so much? He asked me such a complicated question. How am I supposed to answer him?" Lisa also had a headache and said, "Master is probably here because of the North African experimental base." North African? Experimental base? Experimental base? Chapter 36-24. Xiaoqian suddenly felt a headache coming on. "I don't even know what the experimental base he's talking about is." Lisa explained, "Not long ago, you bought a piece of land in North Africa. He wanted to make use of the favorable environment there to develop an electromagnetic experimental base." Alice suddenly interrupted her. "Lisa, he's been here for so long. Don't tell me you haven't even told him about something as important as the Heavenly Eye project?" Lisa didn't know what to say for a moment. Xiaoqian was even more confused. "What's the Heavenly Eye project?" Alice sat down and immediately began to educate him. The Heavenly Eye Project is a concept proposed by Yu. Through the research and development of quantum technology, they will create a Skynet that can cover the entire world's information network. Through this Skynet, missiles can be intercepted at any time, and any missile launch can be interrupted. In other words, if the Heavenly Eye Project is successfully developed, Hurricane Group will become the overlord of the world. Xiaoqian was stunned. Alice was simple and precise. In short, if the Heavenly Eye Project is successfully developed, it can create and stop all wars. Xiaoqian finally understood. So, if this project is successfully developed, Hurricane Group will completely control the world. Lisa and Alice looked at each other with gratification. They nodded and said in unison, "You can say that." Alice in particular did not understand. Xiaoqian and Yu were twins. They were both born in the same womb, but why was Yu so crazy and Xiaoqian so stupid? One proposed the idea of the Heavenly Eye Project, while the other had to explain what the Heavenly Eye Project was for a long time before he could understand it. She really wondered what their genetic makeup was like. Xiaoqian said, "This question is too complicated. If he asks this again, I'll definitely give myself away." Even though he knew if Gong Xiaoying really asked him about the Heavenly Eye Project, he still wouldn't know a thing. What should we do? Lisa and Alice sighed. Alice, did Master say that he'll be on the island for a few days? Alice shook her head. That means you don't know when he'll leave? Xiaoqian said impatiently. Even if our identities are exposed, it doesn't matter. Yu doesn't belong to him. Why is he controlling Yu and using him to monopolize the world's rules? He's our grandfather, how can he use Yu like this? If of course Mommy Asufs would be sad. Before this, he had always thought that Gong Xiaoying had erased Yu's memory and kept him in the Gong family because he loved Yu and missed Yun Shirshir. That was why he wanted to keep him by his side. But now, it seemed that Gong Xiaoying's intentions were not that simple. Could it be that he wanted to use Yu to achieve his position as the king of Hurricane? That was too selfish. How painful was Yu? How painful was Mommy? How painful was Daddy? Could it be that the feelings of so many people were not as important as his ambition? Could it be that his hatred for the Mu family was so deep that he couldn't let go of it? Chapter 36-25. Lisa pulled him back nervously and warned, "Keep your voice down. What if old master hears you?" Xiaoqian couldn't hide the gloom in his eyes. He stared at Lisa and said word by word, "So what if he hears you? If your identity is exposed, Yu will also be in trouble. Why? Why should Yu and my fate be in his hands? I admit that Hurricane Group is very powerful, but Gong Xiaoying can't be so arrogant as to cover the sky with one hand, right?" Xiaoqian said in a low voice, "In any case, I won't acknowledge this grandpa, and I won't call him that again." Lisa and Alice looked at each other with gloomy expressions. Xiaoqian calmed down. Muichen turned around expressionlessly with a frosty expression on his face. Lisa said, "It's best not to let Gong Xiaoying find out that you and Yu have swapped identities. He didn't keep Yu by his side purely to make use of him. Besides dealing with Shangyu." Before she could finish speaking, Xiaoqian suddenly interrupted her. "What did you say?" Lisa knew that she had spilled the beans and immediately shut her mouth tightly. Xiaoqian's eyes were bloodshot. He grabbed Lisa's collar and asked coldly, "Deal with Shangyu? Tell me, what other motives does Gong Xiaoying have? He used Yu to design the Heavenly Eye plan, and he actually wants to use Yu to deal with Shangyu." Alice immediately stopped Xiaoqian and pulled the two of them apart. "Both of you calm down." "How can I calm down?" Xiaoqian said sternly. "My biological grandfather is using my brother to deal with my father. How can I calm down?" Alice took a deep breath and sighed. Because he always thought that it was the Mu family who took everything away from him. Therefore, he did everything he could to destroy the Mu family and Shangyu. If Yu were still in Hurricane Group, the next step of the plan would have been to focus fire on Shangyu. Muichen cried out, "Is he crazy? What benefits does he get from doing this? If Mommy finds out, she won't forgive him at all. When the time comes, if Shangyu declares bankruptcy and the Mu family, even if the Mu and Shangyu's mommies, I will still be by Daddy's side." He paused for a moment before continuing. "Even if the Mu family has nothing left, Be it mommy, me, or you, we won't leave the Mu family. We won't go anywhere. Bang! The huashangyu, the loud noise startled the three people in the room. Lisa and Alice were stunned. They turned their heads and saw a tall figure outside the open door. It was incomparably clear in their eyes. Xiaoyichen turned around expressionlessly and saw Gong Xiaoying slowly striding in. Behind him, a row of tall guards followed closely behind him like stars surrounding the moon. Gong Xiaoying walked in and glanced at Xiaoyichen with his eagle eyes. He said coldly, "What a good not going anywhere. It looks like your family of 4 is really loving." "You're wrong. It's not a family of 4, it's a family of 5. Gong Xiaoying was surprised when he heard this. What? Chapter 36-26. Gong Xiaoying's pupils constricted, but he soon broke into a smile. He calmed down and sized up Xiaoyichen. His words were sharp. "You are Muichen?" Muichen did not reply to him. He only glared at him coldly, clearly regarding him as an enemy. His eyes were full of hostility. Gong Xiaoying's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why is he here? Where's Gong Fan? Didn't I ask you to guard him?" Right from the start, he was acutely aware of the differences between Xiaoyichen and Yu. Even though Xiaoyichen was deliberately imitating Yu, be it his expression, tone, or style of doing things, it was hard not to leave traces behind. Xiaoyichen was Xiaoyichen. Yu was Yu. Both of them were unique, and no one could imitate them. Gong Xiaoying discovered the clues at one glance. At the dining table, he deliberately probed Xiaoyichen, who was caught off guard, and finally gave himself away. He was shocked, but he did not show it on his face. It was only when Xiaoyichen went upstairs that he followed him in puzzlement. Separated by a door, he could vaguely guess the whole story. The two children had been swapped. Yu was no longer on this island, and the person in front of him was not Yu but Muichen. Gong Xiaoying did not expect things to turn out this way. He was extremely shocked. Xiaoyichen said expressionlessly, "Yu has a name. He's called Yunton Yu, not Gong Fan. Yu doesn't care about the lousy name you gave him. The real Yu will only recognize the name mommy gave him." Lisa saw the drastic change in his expression, and immediately stood in front of Xiaoyichen protectively. She said nervously, "Master, I'm sorry." Did they switch? Gong Xiaoying raised his hand and ruthlessly slapped him across the face. Lisa was slapped in the face. Her body shook violently, but she did not fall down. She clenched her fists, raised her head, and said through gritted teeth, "Master, I'm sorry." "But," Gong Xiaoying bellowed. "No buts." "Pa!" It was another vicious slap to the face. Lisa finally lost her balance and fell to the ground. She covered her burning cheeks, but immediately stood up. Without saying a word, she was ready to accept Gong Xiaoying's punishment. "Master, I'm sorry." Gong Xiaoying raised his hand again and slapped her cheek. Lisa calmly closed her eyes, but after a long time, the slap did not land. She opened her eyes in surprise, only to see Xiaoyichen holding Gong Xiaoying's wrist tightly. Gong Xiaoying was so strong, but under his grip, he did not move an inch. "You're not allowed to hit her," Xiaoyichen said coldly. "This has nothing to do with her, it's my idea." Gong Xiaoying sized him up coldly. "Oh, your idea?" He did not believe that this child was smart enough to come up with such a plan to switch identities. Gong Xiaoying's bewildered gaze landed on Alice, and the latter took a step back in shock. Gong Xiaoying's sinister gaze was like an eagle's beak, making one tremble in fear. "Lock them up." At Gong Xiaoying's command, the bodyguards behind him rushed towards Alice and Lisa. One of the men had just grabbed Alice's arm when Xiaoyichen leaped up and delivered a flying kick to the man's elbow. Chapter 36-27. The back of his head hit the ground. The strong impact was like a magnitude 10 earthquake. No matter how iron-blooded a man was, he couldn't bear such intense pain and cried out in pain. Xiaoyichen kicked him a few meters away and shouted, "Who dares to touch them? Whose hand did I break?" Gong Xiaoying snorted. "You think you can go against Hurricane? You're overestimating yourself." Xiaoyichen laughed coldly. "Yes, I'm overestimating myself. Indeed, I'm just a child. I can't do anything to Hurricane. But..." He laughed evilly. "Will you kill me? In other words, unless you kill me, I won't let you touch the people I want to protect. Gong Xiaoying was stunned. He didn't expect a child to ask such a question and have such willpower. His words were a threat, a provocation, contempt, and disdain. Indeed, no matter what, he wouldn't lay his hands on his own grandson. Even if Xiao Yichen looked down on him and disdained him, the two of them were connected by blood. However, Gong Xiaoying wouldn't allow anyone to challenge his authority. Take them down and lock them up. Just as Gong Xiaoying finished speaking, more than 10 mercenaries behind him rushed forward and surrounded Alice and Lisa. He didn't believe that Xiao Yichen could defeat so many of his men. Xiao Yichen looked coldly at Gong Xiaoying and stood in front of Lisa to protect her. Lisa immediately pushed him away forcefully. Don't worry about me. I didn't fulfill my responsibility. This is the punishment I deserve. I'll take responsibility for my own actions. I was the one who swapped you. Even if I was wrong, it's my fault. It has nothing to do with you. You. Lisa stared at him in disbelief. She lowered her voice and questioned him. Xiao Yichen, what are you thinking? Do you really want to make him your enemy? Xiao Yichen said expressionlessly. From the moment he used you, he was already my enemy. I don't want to acknowledge him as my grandfather anymore. No matter what, he can forget about using you to destroy the Mu family. Lisa, you have to remember that he's not your master. Yu is. Have you forgotten? Your Gongjia is Yu's personal bodyguard. Only Yu has the right to decide your life and death. No one else. When Lisa heard this, she didn't know why, but her heart suddenly trembled. This man is my enemy and Yu's enemy. Since he's Yu's enemy, he's also your enemy. What right do you have to listen to him? If it were me, I wouldn't listen to him obediently. Gong Xiaoying finally couldn't take it anymore. Grandfather and grandson had turned against each other. He had never thought that his biological grandson would make him his enemy. His heart ached. It was hard to imagine that things would turn out this way. Instantly, he flew into a rage out of humiliation and said bitterly, "Take him down too. Lock him up." The mercenaries pounced on Xiao Yichen. Before he could react, Lisa, who was behind him, pushed him away. She reached out and gripped the man's hand tightly. With a sudden twist, she broke the man's elbow. The mercenaries surrounded them from all directions. Lisa and Xiao Yichen stood back to back as they dealt with the incoming mercenaries and bodyguards. Their teamwork was flawless. Chapter 36-28. Gong Xiaoying did not expect a child's ability to be so terrifying. Xiao Yichen and Lisa had their backs to each other in tacit understanding. Facing the enemies coming at them from all directions, they threw punches, hooked kicks, and sent flying kicks. Their coordination was amazing and flawless. An adult weighing more than 100 kilograms was sent flying by Xiao Yichen, who was not even 10 years old. He was sent flying. What kind of terrifying leg strength did he have to be able to send an adult flying so far with just one kick? Gong Xiaoying retreated half a step in shock. At that moment he saw Xiao Yichen grab a man by the collar and throw him harshly against a cabinet. With a loud thud, the cabinet fell to the ground. Under Lisa's cover, Xiao Yichen rushed to Gong Xiaoying and grabbed him by the collar. He coldly ordered, "Prepare a boat for me. I want to leave this place." "Don't even think of leaving unless you return Gong Fan." Mu Yichen sneered. "I don't know who Gong Fan is. I only have a younger brother, and his name is Yun Tianyu. Unless you kill me." Gong Xiaoying arrogantly raised his chin and enunciated each word clearly. "Otherwise, don't even think of leaving this place." Mu Yichen narrowed his eyes. At this moment, countless armed mercenaries rushed over from behind. There were hundreds of bodyguards stationed on the castle. When they saw this scene, they thought that it was Mu Yichen who had kidnapped Gong Xiaoying. They were so shocked that they immediately raised their guns and aimed at Mu Yichen. Lisa saw this and rushed over to protect Mu Yichen. "Don't shoot. This is Master's grandson. Don't shoot." The mercenaries did not put away their guns though. They only listened to Gong Xiaoying's orders. Therefore, they did not listen to anyone else's words. Gong Xiaoying was very calm and coldly ordered, "Put away your guns." Only then did the mercenaries put away their guns. Gong Xiaoying lowered his head and exchanged glances with Mu Yichen. He warned, "Give up. I can't leave here." "Then let me give you a kind warning. It's impossible for you to use Yu to go against Xingyu Financial Group and my daddy. Our family of 5 will never be separated. I can brainwash him, but I can also erase your memory. I'm warning you, if you dare to leave this place, I will erase your memory, just like Gong Fan. I told you he's not Gong Fan. Muichen was so angry that he laughed. If you're such a person who likes to force your will on others, who likes to manipulate the fate of others, then you don't deserve to be my grandfather, and you don't deserve to be my grandfather. You don't deserve my mommy to acknowledge you as her father. Pa Muichen glared at her. Lisa, who was watching from the side, was stunned. Only then did Gong Xiaoying react and look at his palm. Just now, when he lost control of his emotions, it was this hand that slapped him hard in the face. He hit him. He had used this hand to hit his own grandson. However, for some reason, when he heard Muichen's hysterical words, he completely lost control. Yun Shishir was the pain he could not bring up. After being left outside for so many years, she was now unwilling to acknowledge him as her father for the sake of that brat from the Mu family. What he couldn't understand was why things had escalated to the point where he had become enemies with his own grandson. He had never thought that the situation would come to this. How did it come to this? You're my grandson. Chapter 36:29. Now I want to leave this place. Whoever dares to stop me, don't blame me for being rude. As Muichen spoke, he walked towards the door. Everyone was armed to the teeth and on high alert. They all raised their guns and were ready to fight. Lisa saw this and was worried. She immediately followed Muichen out of the door. Lisa. Gong Xiaoying turned around angrily and said coldly, "Even you want to betray me?" Lisa's back stiffened, but she did not dare to turn around and look into his eyes. He turned around and said coldly, "Fine. Then I'll warn all of you. Unless I'm dead, none of you will be leaving this place." Muichen stopped in his tracks but did not turn around. He raised his chin. Although his voice was not loud, it was powerful. "Unless you kill me, no one will be able to stop me." He had inherited Muyaja's arrogance. That small back view made Gong Xiaoying feel as though he was looking at Muyaja. He was completely enraged and clenched his fists tightly. Both of them were equally insufferably arrogant. One big and one small, they formed 2 terrifying energy fields. Muichen had only taken a few steps when he suddenly felt a strange piercing pain in his back. He turned around in shock and saw a mercenary pointing a gun at him. He touched the place where the pain was coming from and felt a sticky trace of semen. "What is this?" Muichen pursed his lips and looked coldly at Gong Xiaoying. He saw disappointment and indifference in his eyes. His heart had turned completely cold. However, he was not afraid at all. Even if he died, he wanted to leave this place. Muichen's body swayed. He turned around and walked towards the door again. Gong Xiaoying was so stunned that he almost suffocated. Even so, this child did not beg him for anything. Where was he going? Did he really think that he could leave this isolated island just by walking out of this door? Even if he died, he wanted to return to that man's side. Muichen's body swayed slightly as though he was about to fall. He struggled to hold onto the wall and slowly walked towards the door. A strong sense of dizziness engulfed him. His forehead was covered with cold sweat, and he looked like he would faint in the next second. Gong Xiaoying looked at his stubborn expression and felt both pain and disappointment. "Shoot!" "No." Lisa was so shocked that her eyes widened. She saw that a mercenary behind Muichen had also raised his gun and aimed at him. She instinctively threw herself in front of Xiaoyichen. With a swoosh, an egg pierced her skin. She groaned and furrowed her eyebrows. Muichen heard her painful voice and furrowed his eyebrows. Before he could turn around, he blacked out and knelt on the ground. He wanted to stand up, but Lisa fell into his arms. "Lisa Li." Muichen's gaze froze and he also fell to the ground. In the night, a pair of frightened eyes suddenly opened. Yu sat up from the bed in shock. He instinctively held onto his abdomen where there was still a faint stinging pain. It was so painful, as though he had been shot by a bullet. He dreamt that he was imprisoned in a cage and desperately wanted to escape. However, he was surrounded by countless black shadows. Soon after, he felt that he had been shot many times and woke up from his dream. When he woke up, his back was covered in cold sweat. Chapter 36:30. What was going on? Why would he have such a dream? Yu Yu held his forehead. His temples were throbbing and his veins were popping as if they were about to explode. What's going on? Yu Yu tapped his temples in pain. When he got up, he heard a clear cry coming from next door. Boo-hoo. Boo-hoo. It was Yu Yao's voice. Yu Yu got out of bed and opened the door. Yu Yao's room was next door. He walked in and turned on the lights. He saw a pair of small hands clutching the crib and her little legs kicking in aggrievedly. He walked to the bedside nervously and saw Yu Yao crying so hard that her face was red and her eyelashes were stained with tears. Yu Yu bent down slightly and carried her in his arms, lifting her up gently. Now that he had learned how to carry a child, he could carry Yu Yao comfortably. Surprisingly, when he carried Yu Yao stopped crying. She widened her eyes curiously. The corners of her eyes were filled with tears. When she blinked her eyes gently, the tears started to flow. However, just as the tears started to flow, Yu Yao opened her mouth and revealed 2 snow-white front teeth as she laughed. She laughed so happily that she reached out her little hand that was covered with her saliva and touched his face. Yu Yu frowned and pushed her hand away in disdain. He muttered, "Don't touch my face with your dirty hands." He patted her little hand and Yu Yao retracted her hand in pain. She pursed her lips pitifully and looked like she was about to cry. Boo-hoo. She curled her little hand and stared at him innocently. She looked like she wanted to say something. However, she had not learned how to speak yet and could only babble out a few clumsy words. Brother. Hug. Yu Yao carefully reached out her chubby little hands and opened them, asking for a hug. Brother, hug me. Yu Yu was stunned. He looked at Yu Yao and then looked at her fingers that were covered in saliva. He frowned. Even though he was disgusted, he still held her wrist and held her little hand. Yu Yao tried to scratch his face. Her wet saliva was all over his face. At this moment, Yu Yao finally stopped crying. She grinned as she grabbed his face. She couldn't bear to let go of it. Yu Yao smiled even more happily. Yu Yu touched her face. Suddenly, he heard Yun Shishir's voice from behind him. Why are you awake to wake up? He turned around and saw Yun Shishir standing at the door. Her expression was gentle. Yu Yu was a little embarrassed and wanted to put Yu Yao down. However, Yu Yao clung to his clothes like a clingy kitten, unwilling to leave him. Yun Shishir was a little surprised. She said with some surprise, Yu Yao likes to stick to you so much? She doesn't like to be hugged. Yu Yu was stunned. Oh, is that so? Yeah. You don't remember. When she was young, she would kick her legs and cry if anyone hugged her for too long. You and I were the only ones who were closest to her. I didn't expect that after you left for more than a year, she would still like to stick to you. When Yu Yu heard this, he didn't know why, but he felt a surge of warmth in his heart. She's hungry. Yun Shishir walked over and said to him, Carry her. I'll warm up the milk for her. Yu Yu didn't say much. He only responded softly, Okay. Chapter 36-31. Yu Yu lowered his head and looked at Yu Yao in his arms. His gaze softened. Call me big brother. Yu Yu pinched her fleshy paw. Her soft touch made him feel an inexplicable sense of tenderness. However, she didn't do it when he asked her to. As though she didn't understand what he said, she tilted her head and blinked her clear eyes. She stared at Yu Yu with a confused expression. Didn't you call me big brother just now? Yu Yu shook her little hand and said, Call me big brother again. Yu Yao babbled as she clutched his face. Her gaze suddenly landed on his chest. She opened her mouth wide, revealing her pink and tender gums. Suddenly, she opened her mouth wide and bit down on his shirt. Ah! Yu Yu's face turned pale. He told her stiffly, I don't have any milk for you. However, Yu Yao didn't understand him. Her little hands clawed at his shirt and her little mouth bit his shirt. Her saliva stained his shirt. When Yun Shishir came in, she saw Yu Yu standing helplessly by the crib. Yu Yao was biting his shirt as though she was drinking milk. Yu Yao had been weaned for a long time and had been breastfeeding with powdered milk ever since. Seeing this scene, Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She immediately walked over and put the milk bottle aside. She took Yu Yao from Yu Yu's arms and hugged Yu Yao. She coaxed her. Are you hungry? As she coaxed her, she reached out to grab the milk bottle. However, Yu had already taken the milk bottle and carefully placed it against Yuyao's mouth. Yuyao sucked on the pacifier and smacked it with relish. Sizzle! Yuyao held the milk bottle with her little hands and drank it with relish. Yu stayed by her side quietly. However, he didn't look at Yuyao. Instead, he looked at Yun Shirshir in a daze. Many complex emotions flashed across his eyes. However, Yun Shirshir didn't seem to notice that he was staring at her. She said to herself, "When you were young, you were much more obedient than your sister. Sometimes when you were hungry in the middle of the night, you didn't cry. You slept until dawn without waking mommy up. When mommy woke up and ran to the crib in a panic, she saw you holding your fingers and nibbling on them with relish. At that time, I thought that you must have been worried about mommy's tiredness, so you didn't want to wake her." The boy was a little surprised. Were you still working back then?" "Yes. Until you were weaned." That time Until you were weaned at that time at. What about Daddy?" Just as he blurted out, he realized that he had called him Daddy. His face turned red instantly. He turned his head awkwardly and didn't want to look at her. Yun Shirshir smiled when she heard this. She immediately said, "At that time your daddy wasn't by our side. Did you know? In the past there was no daddy or brother. There was only you and me. We depended on each other. Although life wasn't as good as it is now, mommy was really happy with you." As she spoke, she recalled the happy past. Yun Shirshir's eyes suddenly stung. She blinked her eyes and forced her tears away. She retreated and turned to look at Yu. However, he was also staring at her without saying a word. "Yu?" Yun Shirshir took a deep breath and said, "Don't leave mommy again, okay?" Chapter 36-32. Yu's expression was calm, but his heart was in turmoil. She said, "Don't leave me again." Why was it that when he heard those words his heart was so moved? Especially when he heard the words Yu. He felt his heart burning. Countless chaotic thoughts flooded his mind in an instant. He abruptly rose to his feet and turned around. Just as he was about to leave the room, Yu suddenly let go of the milk bottle and looked at him. She called out in a childish voice, "Big brother." Yu did not stop and walked back to the room. When Muichin woke up, he opened his eyes and saw that his surroundings were bright. He looked around and wanted to move, but he realized that he was tied to a chair and could not move at all. Muichin lowered his head and saw himself sitting on a chair. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and his legs were chained to the back of the chair. His body was also chained to the back of the chair. What was going on? Wasn't he shot? He looked around and finally saw that he was in a dark room. A beam of light shone down from the top of his head, and it was so bright that he could not open his eyes. Shaoichen tried his best to open his eyes and forced himself to adapt to the strong light. He looked at Lisa beside him, who was also tied to a chair. Her head was lowered and she was still unconscious. Muichin looked at her back and saw that the wound was not deep. If it was a real bullet, it would not have left such a shallow wound. He carefully recalled that when he was shot, he fainted and was unconscious. Muichin immediately realized that Gong Xiaoying must have ordered him to shoot with a tranquilizer gun. Could it be that they were shot with a tranquilizer gun? Xiaoichen tried to call out to Lisa. "Lisa! Lisa! Li! You're awake!" A heavy voice suddenly interrupted his train of thought. Muichin spun his head around in shock, only to see Gong Xiaoying standing in front of him and judging him from above. When he saw Gong Xiaoying, anger appeared in his eyes. He struggled and shouted, "What did you do to Lisa?" Gong Xiaoying said coldly, "Don't worry, she's not dead." When Muichin heard that, he asked suspiciously, "You used a tranquilizer gun? Huh, you even know about tranquilizer guns. You're not simple." Gong Xiaoying pulled a chair over and sat down. He sighed and said, "My two grandsons, one is good at martial arts, one is smart and the other is good at martial arts. It's really an eye-opener." "Grandsons?" Muichin mocked. "I didn't acknowledge you as my grandfather. This lord, you'd better not be so sentimental. I'll never acknowledge you as my grandpa." Gong Xiaoying did not exchange pleasantries and went straight to the point. "Where is Gong Fan?" Muichin retorted. "Do you think I'll tell you? Besides, you're asking the wrong person. I don't know any Gong Fan." "I don't need you to tell me. Since you've swapped identities, Gong Fan must be in the Mu family now. Mui Chen snorted coldly, but he was a little flustered. Gong Xiaoying looked at him calmly. When he saw that he did not look at him, he said helplessly, "You're my grandson and I'm your grandfather. No matter how you deny it, it's a fact that can't be changed. You don't have to be so cold to me. It won't do you any good." Chapter 36-33. Mui Chen was a prideful person. After all, he was Mu Yaja's son and had inherited Mu Yaja's arrogance. However, in front of Yun Shishir, Yu Yu and Mu Yaja, he had always been a warm boy. However, in front of outsiders he was a miniature version of Mu Yaja. How could he bow down to Gong Xiaoying? Whether it was threats or coercion, Xiaoyichen would never give in to him. When Gong Xiaoying heard this, the muscles on his face twitched and he was furious. He finally lost control of his emotions and stood up. Glaring at Xiaoyichen, he said, "I'm not threatening you. I'm not trying to scare you. If I can erase Yu Yu's memory, I can erase yours too." It would have been better if he hadn't mentioned this. When he did, Xiaoyichen shouted at him furiously, "You're the one who erased Yu Yu's memory. Just based on this, don't expect me to acknowledge you. Gong Xiaoying, in the past, I respected you because you were Mommy's biological father and my grandfather. Whether you admit it or not, I respected you. However, it doesn't mean that you can bully others. What right do you have to erase Yu Yu's memory? What right do you have? Don't you love Mommy the most? If you love Mommy, why would you do something that would make her sad?" Gong Xiaoying was stunned and looked at him in surprise. He had expected this child to be angry, but he didn't expect him to be so calm even though he was angry. He was too calm. Gong Xiaoying said coldly, "Aren't you worried that if I erased Yu Yu's memory, I can erase yours too?" "You can't erase it," Xiaoyichen said expressionlessly. "Even if you want to erase it, you can't erase mine." "Heh, where does your confidence come from?" Gong Xiaoying scoffed. "Memories that can't be erased. I'd like to see what kind of memory Alice can't erase." "No, don't." At the side, Lisa struggled to raise her head. She opened her eyes and said weakly, "Don't." She was still under the effects of the anesthetic. As a result, he stuttered when he spoke, and his reactions were also extremely slow. However, when she heard that Gong Xiaoying had threatened Xiaoyichen that he would erase his memory, she suddenly became nervous. Gong Xiaoying shouted, "You betrayed me. You have no right to speak here." "I didn't betray." Lisa spat out a few words with difficulty. Her words were intermittent and incoherent. Xiaoyichen looked at her. However, he heard Lisa say firmly, "You master. I didn't betray him." Ever since that day when Gong Jia brought her to Yu Yu and told her that he was the person she would be loyal to for the rest of her life, she swore to herself that Yu Yu was her only master. Unless she died or Yu Yu died, she would never change her heart. Yu Yu was her only master. Even if she had to betray the whole world, she would never betray the person she was loyal to. She had never betrayed Yu Yu. Hence, she was not a traitor. Lisa suddenly said in a powerful voice, "Me? I'm not a traitor." Xiaoyichen was stunned. After a short moment of shock, he smiled. "Lisa." It wasn't that he wasn't moved. He was touched by Lisa's sincerity. Chapter 36-34. Gong Xiaoying looked at Mui Chen but didn't say anything in the end. He suddenly stood up and looked at Mui Chen meaningfully. He said coldly, "Looks like you won't give up until you see the coffin. I'd like to see whose memory I can't erase." After he finished speaking, he immediately ordered his subordinates, "Bring Alice here." Yes. A few minutes later, two of his subordinates brought Alice in. Rather than saying that she was invited in, it was more accurate to say that she was forced in. When Alice walked into the darkroom, she saw Xiaoyichen and Lisa tied to the chairs and unable to move. Her gaze was shocked and she became sullen. "Boss, how could you tie Xiaoyichen up? He's your grandson." Gong Xiaoying looked at her coldly from the corner of his eyes. Suddenly, he walked in front of her and slapped her. Alice's face was instantly slapped to the side. "Don't think that I don't know what you've done. You can't escape the responsibility of swapping the two children. You know very well whether or not you're the one who did it. Do you need me to remind you of anything?" When Xiaoyichen saw this, he stared nervously at Gong Xiaoying and immediately warned him, "Don't hurt her." "Xiaoyichen." Alice turned her back to him and stopped him. Don't talk. This has nothing to do with you. Xiaoqian was stunned for a moment. Alice turned her face. There seemed to be some emotions in her eyes. She looked steadily at Gong Xiaoying. Her chest rose and fell for a long time. Suddenly she smiled bleakly. I know that I betrayed you. I deserve this slap. But boss, what kind of deep hatred do you have that you can't let go of it after so many years? What kind of deep hatred do you have that you want to take revenge on these two children? They were still so young. Yu's memories were erased. It was sealed by my hypnosis. However, ever since his memories were sealed, there wasn't a single day that I didn't regret it. Look at Yu, what has he become? Gong Xiaoying was startled and suddenly stopped talking. Do you think you're doing this for Yu? He had forgotten all his memories. He had forgotten Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja. He had even forgotten who he was. Do you think this is for his own good? You have no right to do this. And you have no right to erase Yu's memory and tamper with his life. Shut up. Gong Xiaoying interrupted coldly. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Yes, you're high and mighty, you're insufferably arrogant. Now the Gong family can call the wind and summon the rain. Looking down on everything. No one has the right to criticize you about what you're doing. But Alice's lips suddenly trembled violently as she spoke. Yu is innocent. He's just a child. He just wants to be by his mommy's side. Look at how cute Yu used to be. He was with his family and he was smiling every day. But now? He's become a cruel, cold, and insensitive person. He's also become someone with terrifying ambitions and hatred that shouldn't exist at his age. He's just a child. How can you bear to torture him like this? Chapter 36-35. Alice did not care about anything else. If you persist in doing this, your daughter will never forgive you. Gong Xiaoying's pupils constricted as he stared fixedly at Alice. It was as if he was an explosive that could explode at any moment. Alice had always been fearful of Gong Xiaoying. However, there was no trace of fear in her eyes right now. Right now, I want you to seal this child's memory, just like how you sealed Yun Tianyou's. She would not make the same mistake a second time, even though she had no feelings for Xiaoqian. However, perhaps because she could no longer have children in this lifetime, she could understand the pain of a mother and son turning against each other. Hence, she could understand Yun Shirshir's pain, as well as Yu and Xiaoqian's pain. She had already killed Yun Tianyu. She could not kill Xiaoqian as well. Gong Xiaoying glanced at Muichen before returning his gaze to Alice. His tone was full of threat. Do it right now. No. Alice took a deep breath and rejected him coldly. I don't want to do this kind of thing again. She mustered up her courage and rejected him with an incomparable conviction. She knew what the consequences of going against the man's order were, and what it meant. The man standing in front of her was the head of the Gong family. What's more, he was the person with the highest authority in the Hurricane Group. Alice knew very well what it meant to go against his order. It was just that she was unwilling to do so, and was even more unwilling to comply with his decision. Gong Xiaoying did not expect Alice to go against his order. His gaze turned stern as he sized her up in disbelief. He was so angry that he laughed. Do you know what you're saying? I know, and I know very well that I'm going against your order. You asked me to wipe Xiaoqian's memory, but I said no. Alice's tone gradually softened as she spoke. Boss, please don't go on like this. You've already hurt Yun Shirshir and Yun Tianyu once. How can you bear to do it again? Do you really want to fall out with Yun Shirshir and her father? Gong Xiaoying was stunned for a moment before he regained his senses. He gritted his teeth and said, whether it's Muichen or Yun Tianyu, didn't she get together with Mu Yaja because they have 2 children? Now, if the 2 children are in my hands, she'll go home. At the mention of Yun Shirshir, gentleness appeared in his eyes. The reason why he hated Mu Yaja so much was not just because of the previous generation's feud. He knew that Yun Shirshir gave birth to these 2 children because she was a surrogate mother for the Muse when she was 18. She, Gong Xiaoying's daughter, his daughter, was so lowly that she was used by the Muse. How could his daughter do such a despicable thing? How dare the Muse? Therefore, he could never forgive the Mu family and Mu Yaja for doing such a thing to his daughter. So what if Yun Shirshir returns to your side? Alice hysterically tried to wake him up. What's the difference between you and an executioner? Shut up. Gong Xiaoying stopped her. Don't think that I won't dare to touch you just because you're Gong Jie's woman, even if I kill you today. Chapter 36-36. Alice was not afraid at all. My life is in your hands. The fate of so many people in the hurricane group is also in your hands. Killing me is just a matter of words. But don't you regret it? You! Gong Xiaoying raised his hand high, but Alice just stared at him without retreating. However, his hand did not fall for a long time. Do you think you're the only one who knows hypnotism? Gong Xiaoying's hand fell slowly, but he laughed coldly. Do you think I can't do it without you? Alice was stunned. Gong Xiaoying turned around and said in a low voice, Come in. As soon as his voice fell, he saw the door slowly open, and a man wearing a white cloak slowly walked in. The man was very young and very thin. He was wearing a cloak, but it seemed empty. His face was buried under the brim of the hat, and the shadow covered his eyes. But it was not difficult to see that this man's features were exquisite. It was just that this exquisiteness was mixed with some elements of gender. There was a gloomy and cold aura around him, like a poisonous snake, beautiful but deadly. It had nothing to do with gender. This kind of beauty could make people hold their breath and focus. He was holding a crystal ball in his hand. However, this crystal ball looked a little special. Inside the transparent glass, there was a ball of purple fog swirling and rolling. Muichen's heart skipped a beat when he raised his head and saw the man. He did not know why, but this man had an especially dangerous aura. As the man walked in, he took off his hat. His face was exposed to the air. It was feminine but beautiful. When Alice saw him, she sucked in a breath of cold air. Master, Senior. Back then, she had studied hypnotism under a master hypnotist. There were only a few students under the master's name. Hypnotism also required talent. There were not many people who had this kind of talent. It could be said that it was 1 in a million. As for this man, he was one of her senior martial brothers. His hypnotism skills were above hers. How could it be her? The man glanced at her and acted as if she didn't exist. He walked to Gong Xiaoying and nodded slightly in greeting. Unless he was hypnotized, he was usually very quiet and did not speak much. However, as soon as he spoke, the first sentence he said was enough to bewitch the mind of the person who was being hypnotized. His voice seemed to have a unique magic power. Sometimes, Alice felt that his hypnotism was not hypnotism, but a kind of magic that could not be explained by scientific means. Senior, why are you here? The man turned around and finally saw her. His deep eyes were like a dark black jade without any luster, but like a bottomless pool of water. Just a glance, it seemed to be able to suck one's soul. Gong Xiaoying said coldly, Seal up all of that child's past memories, do you understand? The man nodded gently. Yes. It was just one word, but it was as cold as the ice and snow of the North Pole, causing people to feel a chill in their hearts. Senior, you can't do that. Alice said in a panic. You can't erase this child's memory, Senior. Take her away. Gong Xiaoying ordered impatiently. Chapter 36-37. The man in the white robe walked slowly to Xiaoyichen and squatted down gracefully. His dark eyes scanned every inch of Xiaoyichen's features and his thin lips slowly curved into a cold smile. Just by looking into his eyes, Xiaoyichen felt as if his body was frozen and he couldn't move. At the side, Lisa saw this and started to struggle. The man glanced at her from the corner of his eyes but didn't take her seriously. No matter how powerful she was, she wouldn't be a threat if she was tied up like this. However, with someone else around, it would be easy to disrupt the hypnosis if they made any noise during the hypnosis. The man said softly, Take her away. Take her away. Gong Xiaoying gave the order and Lisa was immediately taken out of the room. He also left with his men. All the doors were locked from the inside. The man slowly lifted the crystal ball and held it in front of Xiaoyichen. The latter was attracted by the illusory purple fog in the crystal ball, and his eyes suddenly lost focus. He felt as if he was about to enter the man's world. He immediately pinched his palms and forced himself to wake up. Xiaoyichen shook his head forcefully and turned his face away from the man. If he didn't look at him, he wouldn't be hypnotized. The man smiled faintly. He had hypnotized countless people, but most of them were unwilling to do so. Who do you want to see the most now? The man gently placed his hand on the surface of the crystal ball and caressed it. He said casually, "Is it her?" When Xiaoqian heard this, he couldn't help but be attracted by the man's words. He turned his head and looked at the crystal ball. However, he saw that the fog in the crystal ball gradually transformed and reflected Yun Shishir's gentle smile. Mommy! Mommy! Xiaoqian was completely shocked. He could actually see Yun Shishir's face in the crystal ball. The man observed his expression and asked faintly, "Who is she?" Xiaoqian looked at him and bit his lip hard. But he didn't say anything. Cold sweat, drop by drop, continuously slid down from his forehead and flowed into the gaps between his lips. It was extremely bitter. "Oh, that's not her?" The man stroked the surface of the crystal ball again. Xiaoqian stared intently at the crystal ball. The fog continued to transform, and a tender but adorable face was reflected in the crystal ball. "Yueyao? Yueyao?" Xiaoqian suddenly became agitated. He struggled, but the more he struggled, the tighter his hands were tied. "What are you trying to do?" he questioned angrily. The man smiled and held the crystal ball in front of him. In the crystal ball, that tender and cute face slowly came to life. Yueyao opened her eyes wide and stretched out her hands towards him. "Brother hug. Yueyao. Is she the one you want to see?" The man stroked the crystal ball again, and the fog transformed into Yu's face again. However, Yu's eyes were cold, as if she was a stranger. Yu, who was reflected in the fog, suddenly opened her mouth and spoke. "Muichen, don't come back." Her voice was cold, but every word was cruel and heartless. Xiaoqian was stunned. He frowned and couldn't believe that Yu had said those words. "Why?" He smiled bitterly and said to Yu, "Why don't you come back?" "'Cause no one needs you." Chapter 36-38. He didn't know why, but no matter how tough the environment was or how hopeless the situation was, Xiaoqian's heart was about to break when he heard Yu's words. "You don't need me." "That's right." Yu echoed in the crystal ball. "No one needs you." Xiaoqian's pupils gradually lost focus. He stared at the crystal ball numbly. A line of tears slowly flowed down from his left eye. One tear followed by another. In an instant, his face was covered with tears. The man looked at him as if he had been hypnotized. He smirked coldly. "It's not like that." Xiaoqian suddenly looked up and said angrily, breaking down. "It's not like that. Yu wouldn't say such things. This isn't Yu. This is an illusion created by you." The man smiled and said, "I'm not a sorcerer and I don't know magic. This isn't created by me. It's your inner world." He inched closer to little Li Chen and slowly breathed in through his thin lips. "You yearn to be needed and valued. You're afraid of being outlawed and ignored, right? But you're not needed and you're not relied on. They don't need you." "It's not like that." Xiaoqian screamed crazily. "You're bewitching me again. I want mommy, daddy, Yu and Yueyao. They all need me, they all need me." He was irreplaceable. He was Muichen. The man smiled and said, "Have you been lying to yourself all this time?" Muichen gritted his teeth. Suddenly he leaned over and hit the crystal ball in his hand. With a loud crack, the crystal ball fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. The fog in the sphere slowly rose. Muichen could only feel the fog gradually condensing. Finally, it transformed into Yu's appearance. A living Yu was standing right in front of him, as if he could reach out and touch her. The entire world was plunged into darkness. It was so dark that one couldn't even see one's fingers. Everything had changed. The white-robed man also seemed to have disappeared. Muichen lowered his head and looked at his body. There were no ropes, no handcuffs, no chains and no chair. He stood up and looked up. Yu was still standing in front of him, but she did not disappear. "Yu." Muichen anxiously rushed towards him and held him in his arms. His body was so cold that it was as if he had no body temperature. "Why is it so cold?" He nervously grabbed Yu's shoulders and sized him up. However, Yu coldly pushed him away. "Don't touch me." As Yu spoke, his gaze landed on the necklace around his father's neck, only to see a necklace around his neck. It was a purple crystal. All of a sudden, Yu Yu forcefully tore the amethyst off and casually dropped it on the ground. You. Don't call my name. Yu Yu turned around coldly. Muichin, no one needs you anymore. Mommy and Yueyao already have me. No one wants you to come back. So. He slowly turned his head. His eyes were covered by the shadows. His lips were curled into an extremely cold smile. Don't come back. No, it's not like that. Muichin shook his head in disbelief and forced a bitter smile. Yu Yu, I know you lost your memory and don't remember me. But it's okay. You will definitely regain your memory. Chapter 36-39. Shaoichen stared at Yu Yu in disbelief. He did not understand why he would say such a thing. In his impression, Yu Yu was a tsundere, but he had a gentle heart. He would never monopolize Mommy's love. This was not Yu Yu, however. The person standing in front of him with those familiar eyes was clearly Yu Yu. But why would Yu Yu say such cruel words? Yu Yu saw that Shaoichen did not speak, so he asked coldly, haven't you noticed? No matter what, Mommy always prioritizes me. In her heart, I've always been more important than you. You should have noticed this, right? Shaoichen's face turned ashen. Yes, Mommy had always prioritized Yu Yu. This had always been the case. This was because Yu Yu's health was not good. Yu Yu was good at pretending to be obedient. Shaoichen prided himself as an elder brother. Hence, he knew how to take care of Yu Yu, regardless of how big or small the matter was. Even if Mommy valued Yu Yu more than him, it did not matter. Even if Daddy valued Yu Yu more than him, it did not matter. This was because Yu Yu was his younger brother. His most beloved younger brother. No one could replace his position in his heart. Whether it was Mommy, Daddy, Yu Yu, or Yueyao, they were all his dearest family members. They were all unique and could not be replaced. However, when he heard Yu Yu say such cruel words, Shaoichen could not help but feel a sense of loss. A smug look appeared on Yu Yu's face. Mommy loves me more. Compared to me, you're nothing in Mommy's heart. Shaoichen glared at him and clenched his fists. He suddenly lowered his head, looking extremely disappointed. Yu Yu sized him up arrogantly and said casually, I went missing for a year. Mommy didn't eat or drink. When she found out about my whereabouts, she was willing to use you to replace me and bring me home. What about you? You can only stay on this huge island all by yourself. It's not like that. Oh? Yu Yu asked calmly, then what is it? Muichin, you don't have to deny it. Mommy values me more than you. Mommy and Mommy have depended on each other since we were young. What about you? How can you compare yourself to me? As he spoke, he smiled coldly. You don't have to come back. I'm enough for Mommy. Little Chen smiled bitterly and raised his head, revealing a trail of tears on his face. He smiled with tears in his eyes and said gently, Yu Yu, even if Mommy loves you the most, it doesn't matter. I won't be sad. Because you're my younger brother. Yu Yu, who was standing in front of him, was in a daze. You're my younger brother. I'll give you everything. I won't fight with you. Don't worry, I won't be sad. Shaoichen wanted to hug him as he said this. With a look of disgust, Yu Yu broke free from him and flung his hand away. Don't touch me with your hand. Yu Yu said coldly, I don't want an older brother like you. Shaoichen was stunned. Yu Yu's words pierced his heart like a knife through butter. Why? Shaoichen forced a smile, but it was stiff. Is it because I didn't do well enough? Or you don't like me? It's not that I don't like you. I hate you. Yu Yu's eyes were fierce. If it weren't for you, Mommy would only belong to me. I hate people who want to steal Mommy from me. I didn't steal her. Chapter 36-40. After a pause, Muichin said nervously, Mommy only belongs to you. I won't snatch her away, okay? You don't be like this. As he said this, he helplessly reached out to grab Yu Yu's hand. However, Yu Yu took half a step back in disgust. It was as if he felt dirty just by touching him. Don't touch me. Yu Yu's figure gradually blurred and turned into a thin mist before dissipating. No! Shaoichen pounced on him sadly, but it was all in vain. When he looked up again, the scene in front of him had changed again. He saw Xiangti stroll. His home. At this moment he couldn't tell if he was in a dream or reality. Shaoichen bit his lip hard and tried to walk forward. He stood outside the main door. Through the lanyard and across the courtyard, He saw Yun Shishir carrying Yue Yao through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Mommy!" He anxiously groped for the door and tried to open it, but the door was locked from the inside. He was blocked outside the door and couldn't get in. "Mommy, open the door!" Muichen shouted frantically. "Mommy, it's me, Xiaochen. I'm back." However, no one paid attention to him. It was as if he was a ball of air that no one could see. A sense of loneliness enveloped him. Muichen suddenly felt that he couldn't breathe. The feeling of being completely ignored overwhelmed him. "Mommy, can you hear me?" Muichen's throat was blocked. He choked and said, "It's me. I'm Xiaochen. Open the door and let me in, okay? I want to go home." Yu Yu's voice suddenly came from inside the house. "Wuyao, your brother is here." Xiaochen retreated back to Lan Shan. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, he saw Wuyao staggering towards Yu Yu. Yun Shishir and Muyaja stood at the side, looking at him with gratified expressions. Yu Yu hugged Yue and lovingly hugged the cuddly little ball in his arms. Yue hugged Yu Yu's neck tightly and smiled. "Brother." This clear and loud sentence made everyone beam with joy. Xiaochen heard Yueyao's laughter through the window and couldn't help but laugh as well. He hadn't seen Yueyao for a long time and missed her very much. Now, just hearing her clear voice warmed his heart. Wah, his little princess. Xiaochen stood outside the villa and looked on eagerly. However, the warm scene in the house seemed to have nothing to do with him. He wanted to go home more and more to return to that warm home. He missed Mommy, Weiyao and Daddy so much. He missed Yu so much. Xiaochen went back to the main door and pressed the doorbell forcefully. However, no matter how long he pressed it or how many times he pressed it, no one answered him. Outside, the cold wind gradually became bitterly cold. He was shivering from the cold. Muichen couldn't wait any longer. He nimbly climbed over the door and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Standing outside, he gently knocked on the door and window and smiled gently. "Mommy! Yu! Daddy Weiyao!" Xiaochen tidied his clothes seriously and smiled. "I'm going home." Everyone in the house suddenly fell silent. Yun Shishir and Muyaja turned around. Yu also turned around with Yueyao in her arms. However, when her gaze landed on Xiaochen, her expression immediately turned cold. Chapter 36-41. Yu walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and pulled the door open. He asked coldly, "Why did you come back?" Xiaochen's smile froze. He said in a daze, "Because this is my home." "This is not your home. This is my home. Get out." Yu pointed at the door and said coldly, "You're not welcome here." "How could this be?" Xiaochen gasped and looked at Yu. However, he heard Yun Shishir's cold voice. "Don't stand here. You're an eyesore." He looked in the direction of the voice and saw Yun Shishir walking towards him. Xiaochen reached out his arms and wanted to hug her. However, Yun Shishir slammed the window and locked it from the inside. Xiaochen was once again locked outside the door. He was dumbfounded. "Mommy," Yun Shishir said disdainfully through the floor-to-ceiling window, "don't come back. I don't want to see you." "Why?" Xiaochen finally panicked. He anxiously knocked on the door and window as tears streamed down his face. He cried painfully. Mommy, it's me. I'm Xiaochen. Did I do something wrong? Why don't you want to see me? Mommy. The man in the white robe stood up slowly. He held the crystal ball in his hand and stared coldly at Muichen, who was tied to the chair and had already entered a hallucination. Muichen leaned against the back of the chair and closed his eyes. His brows were furrowed as he kept muttering, Mommy, don't leave me. Mommy. From the moment he broke the crystal ball, Xiaochen had already entered a hypnotic environment. Everything he saw was a hallucination that he had created. The highest level of hypnotism was to dig out the deepest, darkest part of a person. Everyone had their darkest side. Even Xiaochen was no exception. In the deepest part of his heart there was a fatal fear. In reality, Xiaochen looked cheerful, gentle and adorable on the outside. But he didn't realize that deep down, he was afraid of losing Yun Shishir's attention. He had always known that Yun Shishir placed more emphasis on Yu. It was difficult to balance a bowl of water. It was hard to be fair when it came to doting on two people. Xiaochen had always known that Yun Shishir took care of Yu more. It wasn't that he wasn't envious, but as an older brother he didn't care. However, deep in his heart, he still longed for Yun Shirshir to love him more. She wanted to be on par with Yu. However, these selfish thoughts had always been suppressed at the bottom of his heart. Xiaoqian didn't care who his mommy loved more. Whether it was his mommy or Yu, they were all inseparable family. As long as he could be with his family, he was already very satisfied. However, through hypnotism, the uneasiness in his heart, as well as the fear of being ignored, were magnified several times. The hypnotism created an illusion for him. Through this illusion he would face the deepest fear in his heart. This fear would be magnified continuously, and it would become an unbearable nightmare. This nightmare was an incomparably cold world. He couldn't walk out at all, and it would be difficult for him to escape. Chapter 36-42. Muichin sat on the chair, his eyelashes trembling violently. Then a teardrop slowly flowed out of his eye. Despair. The white-robed man let out a faint sigh. No matter how strong a person's mind was, it would be difficult for him to accept the despair of betrayal. In Xiaoqin's heart, whether it was Yun Shirshir, Muyaja Yu or Yueyao, they were very important to him. It went without saying how important they were. Entering such a despairing illusion must be very despairing. The white-robed man scrutinized his face. Suddenly he sensed something strange. Xiaoqin's expression gradually softened. It was the kind of softness that came from relief. Yueyao. As he softly muttered her name, his lips curved into a doting and warm smile. He seemed to be relieved. What's going on? The white-robed man stared at him in shock. He had entered his hypnotic illusion. An experienced hypnotist could easily enter the hypnotized person's environment. He entered Xiaoqin's illusion and saw Xiaoqin standing alone at the entrance of the villa. He looked like an orphan who had been abandoned by the world. His back view was bleak and lonely. However, he hid in the bushes outside the villa. He leaned against the railings and looked at the courtyard. The man walked to his side. He could see through the illusion and see the scene in Xiaoqin's imagination. Xiaoqin could not see him. He could also see what he could see through little Ichen's eyes. In the courtyard, Yu sat on the swing. Yun Shirshir stood beside him and gently pushed him. Yu was having fun and let out a string of bell-like laughter. Haha. Mommy, higher. Higher. Okay. Yun Shirshir laughed and pushed him higher. Muyaja stood to the side with Yueyao in his arms, watching everything with a gentle gaze. The family of four without Xiaoqin was still happy and harmonious. Xiaoqin didn't dare to rashly barge in again and disturb the peace. He stood guard outside the door and secretly watched this scene, but his heart was filled with happiness. Especially when he heard Yu's crisp laughter, the smile on his face deepened. Be careful. Even though he knew that no one could hear him, he was still worried that the swing would swing too high and Yu would accidentally fall. From the anticipation and envy in his eyes, it could be seen that he really wanted to join them. However, he didn't dare to destroy this beautiful moment. He knew that he was no longer welcome and was no longer accepted. However, he still harbored a tiny bit of hope. Even if he were to hide in a corner where they couldn't see him, he would still be satisfied watching this scene. The white-robed man was a little shocked. He squatted down and scrutinized Muichin. It was hard to imagine that such a child would not feel unjust and indignant because of such a cold dream and fantasy. Would he not be angry? Everyone ostracized him, distanced themselves from him, and treated him coldly. His most beloved younger brother said to him, "Don't come back." His most beloved mommy said to him, "We don't need you anymore." His most trusted daddy said coldly, "Get lost. I don't want to see you." Was he really not sad at all? He was betrayed by his family and did not feel any sense of loss or despair. Was he really? Chapter 36-43. The white-robed man followed Xiaoqin's gaze. The scene in front of him was heartwarming and warm. However, the illusion that he had created for Xiaoqin was not like this at all. Could it be that Xiaoqin had used his own willpower to tamper with the illusion? An experienced hypnotist would create an illusion to lure the hypnotist into a false illusion. The betrayal of one's loved ones and the abandonment of one's family. In this way, the hypnotist would begin to doubt himself and eventually abandon all of his memories. Yu Yu had witnessed those cruel memories and had begun to doubt himself. In the end, he had been devoured by his first personality, and even his first personality's memories had been sealed away. However, Xiaoqian did not follow his lead and follow the illusion that he had created. Instead, he changed the direction of the illusion. When the white-robed man saw this, he immediately waved his hand gently and the scene in front of him disappeared immediately. Muichen only felt a blur in front of his eyes and the villa was no longer there. Yu Yu and Yue Yao were no longer there either. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir were also gone. Instead, there was a cloud of smoke lingering around them. He only felt that he was in a dark environment where he could not even see his own fingers. Xiaoqian panicked for a moment but quickly calmed down. He walked in the fog and looked around. He stretched out his hand and tried to push aside the heavy fog, but he could not see his surroundings clearly. "Mommy!" Xiaoqian tried calling out a few times but could only hear his voice echoing continuously. He could not hear anything else. "Yu Yu!" He carefully walked through the fog but could not see any trace of anyone. "It must be a nightmare. It must be a nightmare." Xiaoqian kept telling himself in his heart, hoping that he could wake up from the nightmare as soon as possible. However, in the blink of an eye, he vaguely saw a snow-white figure in front of him. "Who's there?" Xiaoqian panicked and chased after the figure. "Mommy! Yu Yu, is that you?" He chased after them in a panic, but after running for an unknown amount of time, he felt something tripping him. All of a sudden he fell to the ground. Xiaoqian looked up tiredly, only to see a small figure standing in front of him. The dense fog dispersed. The little guy's face gradually became clearer. Xiaoqian's eyes were filled with shock. He saw the little Yue Yao standing in front of him, looking down at him with disdain. She was still sucking on the pacifier with relish. However, her gaze was empty, as if she was being controlled by someone. What was familiar was her face, but what was unfamiliar was the feeling she gave off. "You!" Before Xiaoqian could finish his sentence, he felt a dull pain in his chest. He looked down in shock and saw a small hand tightly holding a dagger. The small hand at the end of the dagger belonged to the innocent and harmless little Yue Yao. She ruthlessly stabbed the dagger into his abdomen, but a creepy smile appeared on her face. The corners of her mouth cracked open, and the pacifier fell to the ground. However, she laughed even more happily and let out a crisp laughter that was like the sound of nature. "Ha ha ha, so much blood!" Little Yue Yao retracted her hand and wiped the blood off her face. She smiled innocently. However, in such an environment, coupled with her smile, it was hard not to shudder. Chapter 36-44. Xiaoqian gently clutched his abdomen. He accidentally used too much force and blood started to flow out. "Why?" He stared at Yue Yao in disbelief. He didn't know why the little sister he had always doted on would suddenly stab him so cruelly. "Why?" Yue Yao looked at him. Her gaze instantly became fierce and cold. She said in a childish voice, "I'm going to kill you." "Why?" Xiaoqian shook his head and smiled bitterly. "No, you're not Yue Yao. Yue Yao wouldn't do this to me. She wouldn't." Pfft. Xiaoqian's body suddenly froze. The muscles on his back started to twitch uncontrollably. He stood up with difficulty and lowered his head. Another sharp dagger pierced through his body from behind. Little Ichen staggered a step and swayed as he turned around, only to see his younger brother's face, which was as cold and terrifying as a malicious spirit's. "Didn't I tell you not to come back?" Yu Yu shouted at him in a shrill voice. "Didn't I tell you to get lost? Why did you come back?" Xiaoqian looked at Yu Yu. He clenched his teeth and started to cry. Tears trickled down her cheeks and flowed down her face. He stubbornly wiped his tears and said in a hoarse voice, "Yu Yu, don't do this. I'll kill you. I'll kill you." Yu Yu suddenly pulled out the dagger and kept approaching him. "Muichen, after I kill you, Mommy will belong to me completely. I won't have to worry about anyone else stealing Mommy's love from me. Without you, Mommy will only dote on me." Little Ichen's throat churned as the taste of blood gushed out of his throat. He swallowed hard to suppress the taste of blood and explained, "No, I'm not trying to snatch your mommy away from you. Yu Yu, I'm your brother. I'm your brother." "Shut up," Yu Yu shouted at the top of her lungs. "You're not my brother. I told you to shut up, I don't have a brother like you. As he spoke, he gripped the dagger tightly and approached Xiaoyichen. No, don't. Xiaoyichen kept crying and begging. With his strength, whether he was in a dream or seriously injured, he was fully capable of capturing the frail child in front of him. But he couldn't bear to. He couldn't bear to hurt Yu. Even if he was covered in injuries, he did not want to hurt Yu at all. Yu, I'm your brother, don't be like this. Open your eyes and take a good look. Pfft. Unwilling to let him go, Yu grabbed the man's collar with one hand and stabbed the dagger into his flesh mercilessly. Ugh! Little Chen let out a muffled groan as blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. He gripped Yu's shoulder tightly. Due to the excruciating pain that almost numbed his nerves, he subconsciously wanted to push Yu to the ground. However, after a short while, the strength in his hand suddenly relaxed. Xiaoyichen smiled helplessly. No matter what, he could not bear to hurt his brother. Yu, it's okay if you don't remember me. Little Chen uttered these words with much difficulty. He clenched his fists tightly as he endured the suffocating pain. His back was drenched in cold sweat. With a numb expression, Yu stabbed the man again and again with the dagger. Chapter 36:45. Yu's ferocious face kept getting bigger and bigger in front of him. His eyes were bloodshot and they seemed to have dyed his eyes red. Xiaoyichen's body gradually went limp and he fell to the ground. He couldn't count how many times he had been stabbed. Yu didn't attack his vital points. He only knew that Yu was his younger brother. Even if he didn't recognize him, hurt him and wanted to kill him, he couldn't hurt Yu. Yu, Xiaoyichen choked and said, it's me. Open your eyes and take a good look. Okay, Yu, it's me, Muichen. Yu stabbed him for the last time. He smiled coldly and said expressionlessly, I know you're Muichen. Muichen was stunned. Do you think I've lost my memory? What a joke. I only used you to chase you away from Mommy. Now I've returned to Mommy's side. As for you, you'll die a horrible death here. Muichen froze. He shook his head vigorously and forced a smile. No, it's not like this. Before he could finish his sentence, Muichen vaguely heard the sound of high heels not far away. Her high heels made an extremely pleasant sound when they hit the ground. However, such a cold sound was unavoidably a little creepy in such an environment. Muichen looked in the direction of the sound and saw a woman in a snow-white dress. She was walking slowly toward him through the thick black fog. Mom! Xiaoyichen stared blankly at the voice and forced a smile. Mommy! As the footsteps approached, Yun Shirshir's tall and slender figure gradually came into view. Mommy! Xiaoyichen sat up agitatedly. He couldn't stand up at all. With so many injuries, just sitting up took all his energy. Yun Shirshir walked over and squatted beside him. Her eyes were filled with tenderness as she gazed at his face and gently caressed his cheek. Does it hurt? She asked softly with a touch of soothing emotion. Little Chen smiled and immediately replied, It doesn't hurt. No. Yun Shirshir's gaze fell on the wounds on his body. She gently caressed his wounds with her slender hand and suddenly, she pressed her hand hard. Blood immediately gushed out. Ouch! Xiaoyichen arched his body in pain and broke out in cold sweat. Did it hurt? Yun Shirshir smiled apologetically and immediately. She hugged him gently. Xiaoyichen, it doesn't hurt. It won't hurt anymore. Xiaoyichen smiled weakly. Mommy, it's okay. It doesn't hurt. But you've lost so much blood. Yun Shirshir hugged him even tighter and said in a heartbroken tone, Xiaoyichen, it doesn't hurt anymore. I'll set you free. As soon as she finished speaking, Xiaoyichen felt another sharp pain piercing his heart. It was his vitals. Earlier, regardless of whether it was Yueyao or Yu, none of them had managed to stab his vitals. Only the dagger in Yun Shirshir's hand had mercilessly pierced his heart. However, he could no longer feel the pain now. Chapter 36:46. Sob, 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 sob. He suddenly cried like a child, heartbroken. Didn't matter who it was, be it Yueyao or Yu. He wasn't afraid of anyone who hurt him. Why did it have to be her? Why did it have to be his beloved mommy? Why did she have to kill him? What did he do wrong? Xiaoyichen hugged Yun Shirshir tightly and cried sadly. Why? Yun Shirshir stared at him coldly. Shaoichen held sadly. Why are you doing this to me? What did I do wrong? I'm Shaoichen. I'm your Shaoichen. What did I do wrong? Mommy. You can't do this to me, you can't? The door to the secret room slowly opened. Gong Xiaoying strode in and saw the white-robed man standing expressionlessly with a crystal ball in his hand. He silently looked at Shaoichen, who was sitting on the chair. At that moment, Shaoichen was still immersed in his nightmare. He kept shaking his head as though he couldn't believe it. He muttered something under his breath. Gong Xiaoying listened carefully. He kept asking, why? He stood up straight and looked at the white-robed man. He asked calmly, how's the progress? Sure. The white-robed man raised a finger, indicating for him to keep quiet. Gong Xiaoying controlled his temper and didn't say anything. The white-robed man said, I've already created the scariest illusion for him. He won't be able to escape once he enters this illusion. No matter how strong a person's willpower was, it would be difficult to turn the situation around. Moreover, he was just a child. Gong Xiaoying's lips curled into a smug smile. However, he suddenly noticed that little Ichen's furrowed brows were gradually smoothed out. Even his lips were faintly arched. The white-robed man widened his eyes in surprise. What was going on? He seemed to be smiling. How could he smile so freely in such a dream? The white-robed man immediately raised the crystal ball and compared it to Muichen's face. Through the crystal ball, he was able to peek into his dream. In the dream, it was still the same desolate scene. Shaoichen hugged Yun Shirshir so tightly that it was as if he was afraid that she would disappear. Even Yun Shirshir was flabbergasted. She didn't understand why he was still holding her so tightly when she hurt him like this. Shaoichen smiled, but tears continued to flow down his cheeks. When he opened his eyes, there were still a few drops of tears on his eyelashes. Mommy, I missed you so much. When he said these words, all of the defensive lines were finally defeated. He didn't know if this was a dream or reality. He didn't know if the wounds on his body were fatal. He didn't know if he would die. He also didn't know if the person who stabbed him in the heart was his real mommy or a fake mommy. Even if it was fake, at least he could see her face. However, if he was really going to die, he greedily wanted to hug her for a moment longer. Mommy, I missed you so much. As Shaoichen spoke, he choked up again. He forced himself to smile and said in a hoarse voice, Take me home, okay? Yun Shirshir was stunned and didn't say anything. Mommy, I missed you so much. I also missed you, Yu Yao and Daddy. Chapter 36-47. Shaoichen hugged her tightly and refused to let go. He was afraid. He was afraid that this would be the last time he would see Yun Shirshir. He was in a nightmare, so it was hard for him to realize that he was in a dream. The many wounds on his body were just an illusion. He really thought that he was about to die. Therefore, he only wanted to be able to hold her for a little longer before he died. If he died in his mommy's arms, he would have nothing to fear. Yun Shirshir froze all of a sudden. Yu and Yueyao too froze as if they were frozen in time. These three figures were all illusions created by the white-robed man. All of their actions were under the control of the white-robed man. They were frozen because the white-robed man did not know how to proceed with the hypnosis. He suddenly realized that Shaoichen was an extremely difficult person to deal with. Normally, even if one had extraordinary willpower, one would lose all hope and trust in life because of these cruel illusions. However, Shaoichen's thoughts were not affected by these illusions. What did this mean? This meant that Shaoichen trusted Yun Shirshir, Yuntian Yueyao and Muyaja unwaveringly. What's going on? When Gong Xiaoying saw that the white-robed man had frozen, he reached out to push him. The white-robed man was immediately jolted awake. The moment he woke up, the hypnosis was also dispelled. Shaoichen slowly woke up and slowly opened his eyes. As he did so, a teardrop slowly rolled down his face. However, when he saw everything before him, he was instantly jolted awake. Tears of joy. It was a dream. It must be a dream. He recalled that the white-robed man before him was the hypnotist that Gong Xiaoying had ordered to hypnotize him. Did this mean that the scenes he had seen earlier were all illusions in his nightmare? Shaoichen had mixed feelings for a moment. He closed his eyes and opened them again. The panic and uneasiness in his eyes faded away and were replaced by an astonishing calmness and wisdom. "You want to hypnotize me?" Xiao Yichen angrily said expressionlessly. "You want to create these illusions to seal my memories, right? So, you use memories were sealed under your hypnosis, right?" Gong Xiaoying's eyes widened in shock. Even the white-robed man beside him was shocked, speechless. "What's going on?" Gong Xiaoying looked coldly at the white-robed man and said angrily, "Didn't you say that your hypnosis skills have never failed before? What is this?" The white-robed man could not accept such a failure. He had been a hypnotist for so many years, and he had never failed. Little Li Chen was the first target that had not been successfully hypnotized. He could not accept this reality. How is this possible? The ice on the white-robed man's face finally broke and a rare expression other than coldness appeared. Shock, surprise, and disbelief were all present. Gong Xiaoying was so angry that he laughed. "I want to ask you what's going on." The white-robed man shook his head and repeated, "This is impossible. Just now I must have been disturbed, that's why this happened." Chapter 36:48. He continued coldly, "Gong Xiaoying, you don't deserve me to call you grandfather. You don't deserve mommy to acknowledge you as her father. How could you do such a cruel thing to me and you? Let me tell you, mommy knows how you treated you. She won't let you off." Gong Xiaoying was stunned and did not say a word. The white-robed man asked agitatedly, "How did you do it?" Xiao Yichen looked at him and asked, "What? Don't tell me you didn't waver at all?" The white-robed man's voice was soft and gentle. He sounded like a teenager and did not have the maturity of an adult man. "Your mother's betrayal, your brother's betrayal, your sister's betrayal, and your father's indifference. Don't you feel despair?" Xiao Yichen was silent for a long time when he heard this. Then he curled his lips in disdain. "So, you use this method to achieve the purpose of hypnotizing memories." After a pause, Xiao Yichen sneered coldly and mercilessly. "What a joke! You! Why should I believe that they betrayed me?" Xiao Yichen thought of Yun Shirshir and a warm expression appeared on his face. "Mommy will always be my mommy. You will always be my brother. Whether it's Yao or Daddy, they are an inseparable part of my life. Unless I die, don't even think about wiping away my memory of them." The white-robed man's heart trembled when he heard this. He did not expect Xiao Yichen to have such strong willpower. Gong Xiaoying staggered when he heard this. After a short moment of daze, his eyes revealed a trace of admiration. "Very good." After he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The white-robed man looked at him with a complicated expression before he turned around and left as well. Muichen was left alone in the darkroom. His chest rose and fell for a long time before he finally calmed down. However, for a long time, he did not dare to close his eyes. He was worried that if he closed his eyes, he would dream of those unpleasant scenes again. "Mommy," Xiao Yichen sighed softly. You Wei Daddy you must wait for me to come back." When Lisa regained her consciousness, she found that she was also locked in a secret room. When she opened her eyes, there was a slanted skylight in the upper left corner. Through the skylight, she could vaguely make out that the sky was already slightly bright. It was dawn. How long had she been unconscious? About a few hours. Then what about Muichen? Wasn't he locked there yet? At the thought of Xiao Yichen, Lisa began to struggle excitedly. However, as she struggled, the rope became tighter and tighter. This knot was tied with a special technique. The more he struggled, the tighter it became. Lisa calmed down. She held her breath and concentrated, slowly shrinking her bones. Even the Gongjia did not know that she had the ability to shrink her bones. In the past, when she was in the training camp, she was often locked up. Once she was locked up, she would not be able to eat or drink for a few days and nights. She was extremely hungry, so hungry that her eyes turned red. Thus she learned how to escape from the cage. At first, the bars of the cage were not close to each other. At that time she was thin and small, so she could escape from the cage easily. She stole some leftovers and returned to the cage. Later, when they changed to a stronger cage, she began to practice the ability to shrink her bones. She did not expect that she would really succeed. Chapter 36:49. Using the bone-locking spell, she quickly broke free from the ropes and tiptoed towards the door. However, she was surprised to find that the door wasn't locked with a combination lock, but was chained from the outside by a chain. She gently pushed the door open, and when she pushed it to the limit, there would be a gap between the two doors. Her hand was very small, and when she passed through the gap, she could just touch the lock. Lisa frowned and thought for a moment. Looking around, she didn't find any suitable tools. She suddenly thought of something and took off the earrings from her ears. The earrings were made of stainless steel, and she used some strength to roll the earrings into a long iron wire. Holding the lock with one hand, she aimed the tip of the iron wire at the lock cylinder. Just as she was about to pry the lock cylinder, she suddenly heard footsteps outside the door. She immediately retracted her little hand and leaned against the door, holding her breath in concentration. Until the footsteps gradually faded away, she patiently waited for a while before turning around. Her little hand stretched out and held the lock, using the iron wire to pry it open gently. In less than 3 seconds, a click was heard and the lock was unlocked. Lisa gently placed the lock to one side and carefully pushed open the door. The chain kept loosening, and with a clatter, it fell onto the ground. She heard hurried footsteps from not too far away. It was probably the movements here which had alarmed the people guarding the door or the surveillance cameras outside the door. Her actions had been discovered. Until the footsteps neared, she couldn't care less and kicked the door wide open. She came face to face with 2 fully armed mercenaries. These 2 mercenaries were 2 of the people guarding this island. Usually they were her subordinates, even though Lisa was much younger than them. But when they saw her walking out from the door, they looked at each other in dismay and timidly retreated half a step. They were clear of their own abilities. Even if they were 2 strong grown men, the 2 of them together might not be Lisa's match. Lisa was young, but her ability was way above them. She was a true killing machine. They couldn't possibly be her match. Lisa swept a glance at them and said coldly, "I don't want to hurt you. Do as you see fit." When the 2 of them heard this, they were hesitant. Gong Xiaoying had ordered them to guard Lisa, and they didn't dare to defy him. However, they knew that they weren't Lisa's match. If they went up against her, they would only lose miserably. Moreover, after so many days of guarding the island and working with Lisa, they had developed feelings for each other. One of them suddenly drew out a dagger from his waist and made a cut on his shoulder. He picked a spot that could heal easily and stabbed twice. When Lisa saw this, she was a little surprised, but she immediately understood what he was doing. When the other person saw this, he immediately took out a short knife and imitated his previous action, stabbing his thigh a few times. They covered their wounds and say, "Lisa, we don't want to make things difficult for you. This is the best solution we can think of this. But there is something you must be clear. What was the consequence of betraying Master Gong? Don't act." Lisa was silent for a moment and asked softly, "Where is Master Gong keeping Xiaoi Chen?" Secret room A892. When Lisa heard this, she nodded and said softly, "Thank you." Chapter 3650. The 2 men looked at each other and sighed. They sat down with their backs against the wall and silently wiped the blood from their wounds on their bodies. They also faked signs of an intense fight. Lisa found the secret door. There were 2 locks on the secret door. One was the iris recognition technology, and the other was the password lock. Only by identifying the correct iris could she unlock the second password lock. Lisa's iris was also recorded in the identification range. However, just as she squatted down, she could not help but have some doubts. Had Gong Xiaoying already replaced the iris recognition technology? If that was the case, the identification error would trigger the alarm. Lisa did not dare to act rashly. If the alarm mechanism was activated, the security forces on the entire island would gather immediately. At that time, it would be difficult for her and Muichen to escape. If she angered Gong Xiaoying, she might die. She was not afraid of death. She had seen so many deaths that she was already numb. However, even if she died, she had to bring Muichen back to Yu's side safe and sound. There was a control panel for the alarm on the 3rd floor. Lisa thought for a moment and ran up to the 3rd floor. She nimbly avoided a few infrared defense checkpoints and came to the control panel. There were a total of 2 guards guarding it. Lisa leaned against the door and made use of the metal wire to easily break through the door. Before the 2 guards had time to react, she struck them with 2 karate chops and knocked them unconscious. She immediately cut off the alarm mechanism on the island and logged into the system to investigate the iris recognition range. Fortunately, as she had expected, her iris had already been removed from the recognition range by Gong Xiaoying's people. However, in the display of iris recognition, one of them came from the guard in charge of guarding the control panel. She squatted down and carried the guard horizontally. She walked as if she was flying and carried him to the door of the secret room without any effort. She opened his eyelids and matched his pupils with the iris recognition. The first lock was quickly connected. The guard showed signs of waking up, and Lisa immediately added another hand chop. At the same time, she cracked the second password lock as fast as she could and entered the secret room. Xiaoyichen heard the commotion and looked up. When he saw that Lisa had broken through the door, he was so shocked that he almost suffocated. "Lisa!" he exclaimed in surprise. "You're all right." "Shoo!" Lisa signaled him to be quiet and immediately walked over. She took out the dagger on the guard's body and cut the rope on his body. The rope was very strong. Even with a sharp dagger, it would take a lot of effort to cut it. Xiaoyichen broke free from the rope and finally regained his freedom. He said worriedly, "We'd better leave this place immediately." But how could he leave? This was an extremely thorny problem. This was an isolated island in the middle of the sea. It was like a cage surrounded by the sea. How was he supposed to leave? Lisa said, "I know how to operate the yacht. There is some food and fuel on the yacht. It should be enough for us to get out of here." Xiaoyichen hurriedly nodded. "Then we'll leave immediately. To be safe," Lisa continued, "we'd better inform Master Jie in advance. In case of any accidents, he can come to our aid immediately." "How do we inform him?" "The yacht should have a radio that can connect to Master Jie's satellite phone." Xiaoyichen nodded. He admired Lisa's calmness and decisiveness. Chapter 3651. Lisa said coldly, "A normal rope won't be able to restrain me." Xiaoyichen couldn't help but look at her with admiration. "Lisa, you're amazing." Hearing his praise, Lisa remained indifferent and expressionless as she said, "Now is not the time to talk about this nonsense. We have to leave this place clean." Xiaoyichen pursed his lips but didn't say anything. Lisa suddenly said, "Leaving this place may not be so simple. Are you mentally prepared?" Xiaoyichen nodded vigorously. "Of course. Even if I die, I will return to Mommy's side." "Don't mention the word die," Lisa said unhappily. "I promised Master Jie that I would protect you. Even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will send you back to Yu Yu's side." This was Lisa's show of loyalty. Xiaoyichen's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He asked worriedly, Then what about after I go back?" Lisa raised her eyebrows. She didn't understand why he asked that. Xiaoyichen asked anxiously, "After I go back, do you still intend to return to Hurricane?" Lisa was stunned. She nodded and said, "Yeah. After I send you back to the Mu family, I will return to Hurricane." "Why?" Xiaoyichen was puzzled. "Isn't your master Yu Yu? Shouldn't you stay by his side and be loyal to him? Why do you have to come back?" "If you come back, that Gong Xiaoying," Lisa said solemnly, "Hurricane was the place I was loyal to. I betrayed Hurricane and should be punished. I won't run away." Xiaoyichen widened his eyes in shock. Suddenly, he hugged her tightly and said in a trembling voice, "No." Lisa was shocked and instinctively wanted to push him away. However, Xiaoyichen hugged her tightly and refused to let go. She said angrily, "What are you doing? Lisa, don't come back. If you come back, Hurricane will kill you. I don't want you to die." Lisa initially tried to push Xiaoyichen away, but when she heard what he said, she was stunned for a long time. She was stunned by his words. "I don't want you to die. What are you doing?" "Lisa, when I return to the Mu family, can you stay with me? Since you are Yu Yu's bodyguard, then stay by his side." "Shut up," Lisa shouted. "You're not my master. What right do you have to give me orders? Command." Xiaoyichen was stunned and didn't say anything. How could she say that he was giving her orders? Xiaoyichen suddenly said angrily, "Lisa, you're not a machine or an animal. What right do you have to follow someone else's orders?" "You're not a machine or an animal. What right do you have to follow someone else's orders?" In the past, no one had ever said that to her. You also have a life. You can also have your own personal will. Why do you have to follow someone else's orders? Even you has never ordered you around like a machine. Why do you think so lowly of yourself? What betrayal! Hurricane has always been using you. Why are you willing to be used by others? Why are you willing to be used by others? Chapter 36:52. Lisa suddenly smiled bitterly. She said indifferently, I was born to be a killing machine. My life has never been in my control. That's why I don't have a will. Xiaoqian asked anxiously, how can that be? Don't you have a dream? Have you never thought about what your life will be like? My life? You'll grow up. When you grow up, you'll be like my mommy. You'll have a job that you'll be satisfied with. Maybe you'll even find a man you love and have children with him. Have you never thought about these? When Lisa heard this, she couldn't help but feel a little dazed. She shook her head sincerely without any expression on her face. I've never thought about it. She had also fantasized about her future. Perhaps she would lose her life in order to protect her master. Perhaps she would kill countless people in order to complete her mission. She had also thought about what would happen if she left Hurricane one day. However, she didn't know what her fate would be if she left Hurricane. For as long as she could remember, she had been treated like a killing machine. To her, human lives were just cold numbers without any warmth. She was already numb to it. She even thought that life was just like that. To kill and to be killed. To live and to die. It was just a matter of a single thought. Perhaps her life would come to an abrupt end at that moment. Xiaoqian said indignantly, life can be beautiful. Lisa, give up on Hurricane. Stay with us, Lisa fell into a state of hesitation. While she was deep in thought, she suddenly heard some strange movements outside the door. She immediately regained her senses and held his shoulder. Now's not the time to talk about this. Let's get out of here. Okay. Xiaoqian immediately stood up as well. However, he had already made up his mind. No matter what, he would not let Lisa return to Hurricane. Xiaoqian was walking towards the door when Lisa turned around and suddenly shouted, wait! Don't rush out. What's wrong? Come here. Lisa walked to the front of a secret door. She reached out her hand and gently pressed on an area. She heard the sound of machinery operating and the faint sound of gears churning. Then, a large part of the originally bare wall caved in. Then a row of weapon racks slowly rose from the bottom, displaying all kinds of weapons. There were submachine guns, sniper rifles, grenades, flash bombs, and some melee weapons. Lisa walked to the weapon rack and pinned a defensive master and a desert eagle to her waist with an expressionless face. Xiaoqian walked over as well. He casually picked up a Nepalese army knife and slung an entire magazine over his back. He then picked up a revolver and an M4A1, only to see that Lisa had already slung an AK-47 over her shoulder. So valiant! The recoil of the AK-47 was very strong. He still found it hard to believe that Lisa, who was so thin and weak, could handle a gun with such a strong recoil. Lisa realized that Xiaoqian was secretly looking at her. She said coldly, what are you looking at? Do you have to use such a valiant gun? Lisa ignored him and took out a few more grenades and stun grenades and buckled them on her waist belt. She asked, are you ready? Xiaoqian nodded. Don't you need a bulletproof vest? No. Chapter 36:53. Bullets at close range could even penetrate a wall, let alone a bulletproof vest. Hence, no matter how tough a bulletproof vest was, it would be useless in front of these bullets. Lisa had never used a bulletproof vest. To her, life and death depended on who had the most accurate, stable, and fast marksmanship. Whoever killed first would be the first to die. Lisa was also taking a gamble. Would Gong Xiaoying's men really shoot Xiaoqian? Gong Xiaoying had always been cold and ruthless. Even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. No matter what, he would not shoot his own grandson, right? Lisa handed Xiaoqian a pair of goggles and said to him, put this on. Why? Lisa said, it's to prevent flashbangs. Xiaoqian put on the goggles. Lisa said to Xiaoqian, let's go. Xiaoqian nodded. Xiaoqian was a little surprised as he followed behind Lisa. He had seen many tough guys in the special training camp, but he had never seen a girl like Lisa. She was so young, but she was so courageous. She was simply cool. Xiaoqian could not help but look at her with admiration, just like a little fan. Lisa shouted, "What are you waiting for?" With the AK-47 in her arms, she walked to the door, raised her leg, and kicked the door wide open. As the door opened, she casually threw out a flash grenade. With a strange sound, the grenade exploded. Alas, Lisa and Little Chen had put on protective goggles beforehand, so they only saw white for a brief moment before regaining their vision. Lisa glanced around. As expected, the door was surrounded by fully armed mercenaries. Following the explosion of the flashbang, everyone's vision was damaged and they crouched down with their guns. Lisa smiled coldly and said calmly, "We've worked together for so many years. I don't want to hurt you. Now I'm leaving with my men. If you dare to stop me, don't blame me for disregarding our friendship." "Lisa, we have received orders from Master Gong to not let you take him away." "I don't care," Lisa said expressionlessly. "I'll shoot whoever dares to stop me." Everyone was silent. One of them said, "Lisa, you should know us. Gong Ye's order was the highest order. Even if he had to go through water and tread on fire, he would not hesitate. Even if we die, we must fulfill our duty. This is our mission." "What a great mission." Lisa nodded her head in satisfaction. She pulled the trigger and aimed at the mercenary's thigh. Bang! She fired. The bullet penetrated the muscle of his thigh. The man groaned, but he didn't show much pain. Lisa turned around and said to Xiaoqian, "Follow me. I'll take you out of here." Xiaoqian didn't think much of it. "I can get out of this place even if I'm alone. Don't worry about me. Just take care of yourself." Lisa didn't say anything and rushed toward the end of the long corridor. Xiaoqian saw Lisa turn a corner. Then he heard the sound of gunfire from an AK. He was slightly startled and immediately rushed over. However, he saw that Lisa was safe and sound. Only the mercenaries who were lying in ambush in the corner were all hit by the bullets. He was shocked, but only then did he realize that Lisa didn't hurt their vitals. She only shot them in the arms. In the end, Lisa was still a person of friendship. She didn't kill them all because of their friendship. Chapter 3654. Based on her abilities, she could have killed her way out. However, she did not go all out and gave them a chance. These mercenaries knew very well that Lisa had the ability to kill all of them. However, she only shot them in the arm. Firstly, it was to remind them that she had shown them mercy and hoped that they would show them some mercy. Secondly, she did it so that they could give Gong Xiaoying an explanation. Xiaoqian followed Lisa to a corner and reloaded his gun. He initially thought that they would have to kill their way out if they wanted to leave this place. However, he was shocked to find that the mercenaries did not make things difficult for them along the way. Lisa took the initiative to shoot at them. The mercenaries who were shot in the arm immediately fell to the ground and did not move an inch. The wounds on their arms were only minor injuries to them, and did not affect their ability to fight. However, they did this because they did not have the heart to kill Lisa. There were so many of them. Could it be that they could not stop the two children, Lisa and Xiaoqian? Impossible. No one dared to shoot at Xiaoqian. No one had the heart to shoot at Lisa. Lisa was also shocked that no one made things difficult for them. She was still in disbelief when they were about to reach the harbor. "The yacht is over there." Xiaoqian pointed at the white yacht that was docked at the harbor and exclaimed in surprise. Lisa immediately said, "Quick, get on the yacht first." Xiaoqian nodded and immediately ran toward the yacht. Lisa followed behind him and looked around. Suddenly, she saw a few barrels of gasoline neatly stacked at the gate. She immediately walked over and picked up 2 barrels before catching up with Xiaoqian. Before boarding the yacht, Lisa spread the gasoline evenly on the surface of the sea. When they boarded the yacht, Xiaoqian and Lisa looked at each other in dismay. Lisa asked, "Do you know how to operate a yacht?" "If it's not too complicated, I do." "Are you sure?" "Yes," Lisa immediately said. "Then you go ahead and start the yacht. I'll stay here and guard it." "All right." Xiaoqian immediately snuck into the cockpit. First, he glanced at the dashboard and central control panel, only to find that they were all in English. His English wasn't very good. This put Xiaoqian in a difficult position. After trying for a long time, he still couldn't figure it out. However, he was now very far away from Lisa's position. Running to her for help would waste a lot of time. If Gong Xiaoying's men came after them, they would be in danger. Xiaoyichen braced himself and stared at the colorful buttons with a bitter look on his face. Although his English wasn't particularly good, he could at least recognize a few English words. Relying on his basic vocabulary, he finally understood the starting mechanism. First, he turned the key, pressed the button, adjusted the gear, lowered the lever and set the route. He felt the yacht shake as it started moving. Success! Xiaoyichen was pleasantly surprised. After a round of debugging, he was already drenched in cold sweat. Finally, it was activated. I'm going home. Xiaoyichen's heart was filled with countless emotions. He could finally go home. He could see Mommy, Daddy Weiyao and Yu again, his family whom he missed day and night. Chapter 36:55. Lisa was holding the gun when she heard Xiaoyichen's voice coming from the loudspeaker. She turned her head in surprise and looked up at the loudspeaker. However, she heard Xiaoyichen's excited voice again. Lisa, let's go, I'll take you home. When Lisa heard this, her heart felt warm, as if countless warm currents had surged into her body. Finally, a crack appeared on her usually cold face. She gently tugged at the corners of her lips and felt happy from the bottom of her heart. Xiaoyichen said, "We can go home now." He even said, "Lisa, let's go, I'll take you home." He used the word we. He said he would take her home. It gave her the illusion that she too had a home. "Okay, let's go home." She said that, even though she knew that Xiaoyichen wouldn't be able to hear her since there were no sensors or pagers. The yacht started moving slowly and gradually left the harbor. Lisa saw that the main force was chasing in the direction of the port. She immediately aimed at the spot where the gasoline had been spilled and fired a bullet at the sea. With a boom, the bullet ignited the gasoline. Half of the sea immediately erupted into a volcanic sea of fire, isolating the main force from the main force. They couldn't get close. Lisa returned to the cabin and walked to the cockpit. She saw Xiaoyichen holding the steering wheel and focusing on driving according to the route. She was a little surprised. "You really know how to drive a yacht?" "Yeah, I've driven one before." Other than especially complicated fighter jets, he knew how to drive tanks on land, yachts in the sea, and small helicopters in the sky. Lisa was a little surprised. She hadn't expected this little guy to be so capable. She went back to the storage room and carefully took stock of the gasoline, food, and water. She calculated that the food and mineral water reserves were enough to last them for more than a month at sea. It was more than enough. She passed the water and food to Xiaoyichen and said to him, "Eat something and drink some water first." As she spoke, she pushed little Yichen to the side, took over the steering wheel from him, and started operating the car. Xiaoyichen asked nervously, "Do you know how to drive a yacht?" Lisa turned around and said disdainfully, "I'm different from you." "Oh, it's a fighter jet. I've seen it before." Lisa said, "Eat something first." "What about you? Have you eaten yet?" "I've already eaten." Xiaoyichen sat at the side, hugged the bread and mineral water, and wolfed them down. He was so hungry that he didn't care about his table manners. He devoured the bread and water like a whirlwind. After he finished eating, he didn't forget to suck on each of his fingers, not letting go of a single crumb. Lisa was frightened by his shocking table manners. "Are you that hungry? We can't waste it." Xiaoyichen licked his fingers and asked curiously, "I don't know if there's enough food on the yacht." "Don't worry, a month won't be a problem." When Xiaoyichen heard this, he couldn't help but feel suspicious. "Are you sure you're calculating based on my appetite?" Lisa was speechless. "I have to eat at least 4 pieces of bread a day. That's the standard. Are you a pig? How can you eat so much?" Lisa snorted and said, "There's a lot of compressed energy biscuits on the yacht. It's enough for you." Chapter 36:56. On the island, Gong Xiaoying stood by the port and looked at the raging fire on the sea. The mercenaries were flying helicopters in the sky to extinguish the fire. The waves were strong and the wind swept up the flames, causing a heat wave to hit them. A man in a suit rushed over to Gong Xiaoying. "Master Gong, the wind is too strong here. Why don't we go back first?" Gong Xiaoying nodded but did not say anything. He turned around and returned to the huge castle. When he entered, he saw the mercenaries kneeling on the ground with solemn and ashamed expressions. He glanced at them and saw that they had different degrees of injuries, but they were all injured on their thighs. He had already guessed what was going on, so he didn't show much surprise on his face. "Are the two kids hurt?" he suddenly asked coldly. The group shook their heads. How would they dare to hurt little Li Chen? And how could they bear to hurt Lisa? Gong Xiaoying asked sternly again. "Are you sure? Little young master is not hurt. We did not shoot." When Gong Xiaoying heard this, his expression softened. One of the mercenaries asked carefully, "Master Gong, do we still want to chase after them?" "No need." Gong Xiaoying waved his hand in annoyance. "Let's retreat." "Yes." Everyone nodded, but they remained kneeling on the ground. Gong Xiaoying did not leave, so they did not dare to stand up. Gong Xiaoying glanced at them and turned back to look at the endless sea through the floor-to-ceiling window. He felt a little desolate. Forget it. Forget it. Let the little guy return to his family. Now he was sober. He was enlightened. He knew that some people could not be kept. Even if he could keep them, he might not be able to keep their hearts. Gong Xiaoying closed his eyes and walked towards the escalator. When he disappeared from sight, one of the mercenaries asked carefully, "I think Master Gong did not intend to stop little young master from leaving. If Gong Xiaoying wanted to stop him, this huge castle would undoubtedly be a cage on the sea. No matter how capable you are, you can forget about escaping." Why were Xiaoyichen and Lisa able to board the yacht so easily? There were keys on the yacht, and it was also equipped with all kinds of sophisticated weapons and radio communication systems. There was even an abundance of food and fuel. Gong Xiaoying must have secretly instructed his subordinates to prepare this. Gong Xiaoying was a prideful person. How could he tell Xiaoyichen that he was letting go and that he could leave? On the surface, he appeared calm and collected, but in reality, when faced with Xiaoyichen, how could he be so cold-hearted? Perhaps it was because he had personally witnessed Xiaoyichen's longing for Yun Shishir that even hypnotism could not seal his memories. Such a persistent heart had finally moved him. Gong Xiaoying also understood that some feelings could not be separated. Even though he was reluctant, he had no choice but to let go. Hurricane Group. This was not Xiaoyichen's home, nor was it Yu Yu's home, nor was it Yun Shishir's home. "It will take 2 months to reach the port of the capital from here." Xiaoyichen was shocked. Lisa said, "Ashland Island is indeed very far from the capital. Moreover, this is a yacht, not Master Jie's ship. It won't be fast. But we only have a month's worth of food. Then we'll go to France." Chapter 3657. Lisa pointed at the map and said, "It's not far from France. We should be able to reach it in about a month." As she said this, she patted Xiaoyichen's shoulder heavily and said, "You have to be a little more frugal. The food reserves will last us for 2 months. I've calculated that if we only eat 4 pieces of bread a day, we can last for 2 months. Water is not a problem." 4 pieces of bread a day. Xiaoyichen complained incessantly. "Are you trying to starve me to death? There's no other way. That's all we have. If you're hungry, just drink more water." Xiaoyichen looked as if he had a deep grudge against her. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Lisa continued, 2 months' worth of food reserves is already sufficient, okay? We're escaping from a disaster, not on vacation. You have to be clear about your priorities." "Lisa." Xiaoyichen suddenly stared at her, his eyes twinkling. Lisa cautiously took half a step back and narrowed her eyes. "What? You've changed." "How have I changed?" Xiaoyichen said. "In the past, you were a woman of few words. Now you speak more than before." Lisa was stunned. She turned her head away awkwardly and did not say another word. She was ignoring him. Xiaoyichen muttered in his heart, "I'm telling the truth." In the past, Lisa was like a block of wood. Other than Yu, she ignored everyone else. "Oh right. Hurry up and contact my uncle. Tell him to be ready to receive me at any time," Xiaoyichen said and felt a little troubled. "There should be a radio on this yacht, right?" "Yeah." Lisa turned on the radio and connected to Gong Jie's satellite radio. She waited for a long time but no one picked up. Xiaoyichen frowned. "What's going on? Don't tell me she's pregnant," Lisa muttered to herself. She opened the door of the equipment and checked the radio line and signal. Everything was normal. Being able to connect and send out a message to the outside world meant that there was no problem. Maybe he didn't bring his satellite phone with him, Lisa said to Xiaoyichen. Xiaoyichen nodded. What should we do now? The yacht travels day and night, so two people need to take turns. Lisa said to him. Go and rest first. I'll drive until nighttime. You can take over for me at night. Xiaoyichen immediately said. I'm not tired. Go and rest first. Lisa didn't allow him to explain. Her tone was like an order. Xiaoyichen had no choice but to return to the cabin. The cabin was divided into 6 parts. 2 of them were bedrooms with a 1.5-meter-long bed, a sofa, a wine cabinet, a TV, a coffee table. Although the Sparrow was small, it had all the vital organs. However, this yacht wasn't small. It was worth hundreds of millions of yuan. Although it wasn't as big as the one Gong Jie gave him, it was still very big. Xiaoyichen lay down on the bed and fell asleep before he knew it. Halfway through, Lisa walked into the bedroom to take a look. Seeing that Xiaoyichen was still sound asleep, she guessed that he hadn't been sleeping well for the past few days. Seeing that he had kicked the blanket to one side, she pursed her lips helplessly. She walked to the bedside and gently covered him with the blanket. Just as she was about to get up, little Li Chen, who was still asleep, suddenly reached out and grabbed her wrist tightly. Lisa! He called her name silently. Lisa felt that his hand was very hot. She wanted to retract her hand, but Xiaoyichen held it so tightly that she couldn't break free. Chapter 36:58. Lisa. Hearing him call her name, Lisa quieted down and frowned. She didn't know if this guy was really asleep or just pretending to be asleep. She leaned closer to him suspiciously and heard Xiaoyichen mumbling in his sleep. Come home with me? Lisa's pupils dilated slightly. She looked at little Li Chen in a daze. The words that came out of his mouth were indistinct, but every word made her heart beat wildly. Let's go home together. As Xiaoyichen mumbled in his sleep, he held her hand tightly as if it was a precious treasure. Lisa actually forgot to retract her hand. Only after a long time had passed did she suddenly wake up. She immediately pulled her hand back, only to feel that it was burning hot. It was as if she had been soaked in lava. Lisa's heart was in a mess. She turned around abruptly and left the room without looking at Xiaoyichen again. Growing up, she had seen many deaths. She had been reborn from the blood clots of death. She had stepped on countless corpses of her companions to survive until now. She had never dreamed of having a family. However, this guy was now saying to her, Lisa, let's go home together. Her heart was beating wildly all of a sudden. Lisa returned to the cockpit. The yacht was on autopilot. She canceled the autopilot and started to control the yacht according to the route. According to the schedule, she was supposed to wake Muichen up. However, seeing that he was sleeping so soundly, she didn't have the heart to wake him up. Let him sleep for a while more. She could still hold on for one more night. Lisa looked at the sea quietly. However, at this moment her heart was like the calm sea. Underneath the surface, there were turbulent waves. When Xiaoyichen woke up, he sat up on the bed and looked out the window. The sky was already turning bright. It was already dawn. It was already dawn. He was a little stunned. Was it already the next morning? Why didn't Lisa wake him up? What happened? Burning with anxiety, he got out of bed and rushed to the cockpit with his messy hair. However, he saw Lisa sitting on the side. The yacht was on autopilot. She was drinking milk and eating hardtack. When she heard footsteps, she turned around and was surprised to see Muichen walking out with his messy hair. You're awake? Why didn't you wake me up? Oh, I saw that you were sleeping so soundly that I couldn't wake you up no matter how hard I tried, so I just didn't bother. As Lisa spoke, she took another bite of the hardtack. The hardtack was very hard, and when he bit into it, crunching sounds could be heard. Xiaoyichen looked at the dashboard and clicked on the yacht's autopilot mode. Lisa explained, the yacht is set to autopilot mode, but someone has to guard it to prevent any accidents. He ruffled his hair in frustration and said to Lisa, go and rest. Okay, wait for me to finish eating. Lisa finished her hardtack and stood up. She said to him, I'm going to sleep. Wake me up in the evening. Xiaoyichen immediately said, I won't wake you up. You can sleep a little longer. It's okay. Lisa turned around and smiled at him. My biological clock is very punctual. I'll wake up on my own at that time. With that, she left the cockpit. Xiaoqian was still stunned on the spot. Lisa rarely smiled. However, she had just smiled at him. Chapter 36:59. Xiaoqian remained rooted to the ground. Lisa rarely smiled. However, she had smiled at him just now. Xiaoqian's heart thumped wildly. He pretended to be calm as he sat in his seat. He was still in a daze. So Lisa's smile was so beautiful. While Xiaoqian was still in a daze, the door opened again. Lisa stood at the door. Seeing him in a daze, she frowned and asked, "Are you still asleep?" "No." Xiaoqian immediately explained. I'm thinking about something." After a pause, he asked in confusion, "Do you have any other instructions?" "I've already contacted Master Jie through the radio. He said that he would send people to the nearest port to receive us as soon as possible." As Lisa spoke, she pointed at the blinking red on the dashboard and said, "I've turned on the radar coordinates. Remember, don't touch that green button." The radar coordinates would constantly send signals to Gong Jie's system, so that they could be located in time. Xiaoqian nodded. "Okay, don't worry. I won't touch it." "Okay." Lisa looked at him deeply. Without saying anything else, she turned around and closed the door. Xiaoqian stood by the dashboard. Thinking back to the smile Lisa had shown him just now, he smiled contentedly. Lisa. She smiled at him. Xiaoqian took out an energy biscuit and a bottle of milk from the food storage box. He opened the packaging and took a bite. The biscuit had been compressed. Even though it was a small biscuit, it could replenish 10 times the energy of a normal biscuit and give him a strong sense of fullness. He drank a mouthful of milk and thought back to his dream. In his dream, he had brought Lisa home and lived a normal life. He had actually smiled foolishly. "What? Xiaojie, is what you said true?" In the living room, Yun Shishir's eyes widened in shock. She couldn't believe it. Gong Jie nodded. He glanced at Muyaja and said with certainty, "Lisa just called me. She said that she and Xiaoqian have left Ashland Island and are now on a yacht." "Lisa?" Yun Shishir looked confused. "Who is Lisa?" "Lisa is Yu Yu's bodyguard. She was the reason why we could successfully switch Yu Yu back." Yun Shishir nodded in understanding. "I see." She thought for a moment and asked worriedly, "Then how did they come back? Was there an escort?" At this point, a worried look appeared on his face. "No, they came back from Ashland Island alone." When Muyaja heard this, he couldn't help but feel suspicious. He asked worriedly, "How could it be just the two of them? Isn't that very dangerous?" There were too many uncertainties at sea. It was hard to imagine if the two of them could successfully and safely arrive on a yacht without anyone's help. Gong Jie immediately comforted him. "I may not believe others, but I definitely believe in Lisa. She's not an ordinary child. You can rest assured." "Child? Lisa is a child." Yun Shishir became even more uneasy. "Two children? Gong Jie, how can I rest assured with two children? What if something happens?" His lips curled into a confident smile. "Sis, trust me, okay? I've already sent people to help them. I'll be there as soon as possible to meet up with the two little guys." Chapter 36:60. Lisa. Lisa. When Lisa woke up in a daze, she saw Xiaoqian's warm smile. She sat up nervously, leaned against the wall, and stared at him a little defensively. "What are you doing?" She looked out of the window and woke up. She rubbed her eyes and asked, "Did you change the guard?" "No." Xiaoqian winked at her mysteriously. "I caught something good." Lisa followed Xiaoqian to the deck. He took out a charcoal stove from somewhere and lit it up. Then he set up a barbed wire net. 2 huge fish lay on top of it. As the meat was cooked, it emitted a tempting aroma. "Fish?" "Yes. I don't know what kind of fish it is, but I think the meat of the fish should be edible." Lisa frowned. Indeed, not only was the meat of the fish fresh and tender, but it was also suitable for grilling. However, some sea fishes were poisonous and inedible. Lisa walked over and identified it. She often sailed on the sea, so she recognized it at a glance. "This is a salmon." "Salmon?" Xiaoqian didn't know what a salmon was. He was only concerned about one thing. "Can it be eaten?" "Of course it can be eaten. Idiot." Lisa scolded him and sat down on the deck. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "How did you catch this fish?" "I flipped over the fishing net and casually fished it out." He happened to encounter a school of fish on the calm surface of the sea and casually fished it out. Lisa looked at the various seasonings next to the stove and asked suspiciously, "Where did these things come from?" "From the storage room." Xiaoqian smiled proudly. "I wanted to check if there was anything in the storage room, but I smelled pepper. In the cabinet I found these seasonings and the barbed wire net. Since there are these things, there must be something to grill, right? I looked around again and found this stove in the corner." Lisa listened for a long time and only came to a realization. That was, the potential of a foodie was indeed limitless. However, it was all thanks to the little glutton Muichen that they were able to eat at sea. Lisa sat down and glanced at the fish. She quickly turned it over, otherwise it would have been burnt. Xiaoqian brushed the oil again. Just by smelling the fragrance he felt a little restless. Lisa complained, "Why didn't you catch more fish when you encountered a school of fish?" "I caught a few, but the rest ran away." Xiaoqian said helplessly, "I'm not a big fish. It's already a miracle that I was able to catch 2 of them. This size is considered small among the salmons." Xiaoqian did not have a way out. "Moreover, if you fry the fish fillet, it will be more tender." "You seem to have a lot of experience." Lisa raised her eyebrows and said, "I didn't know about these tools. Otherwise, I would have caught a school of fish for you to see." Xiaoqian's self-esteem was inevitably hurt. He felt that Lisa was omnipotent. Lisa glanced at him and explained, "When I was training on the island, I often caught fish." "Oh." Xiaoqian glanced at her and suddenly said curiously, "Actually, I have a question, but I don't know if I should ask." "Huh." Chapter 3661. You said that you were born as an assassin and received a lot of cruel training. Are you the only one? Yes. Then, Xiaoqian hesitated. Don't you feel lonely if you're the only one? Lisa was taken aback and looked at him in surprise. This was the first time in her life that someone had asked her such a question. Lonely? Xiaoqian nodded and looked at her seriously. If you're alone, there's no one to talk to, no one to play with. Won't you feel lonely? As she said this, she couldn't help but recall that when they were young, Muyaja was busy. At that time, Muwanru was not close to him either. He liked to lock himself in his little world and talk to the toys, the walls, and even the air. He would imagine other people sitting in front of him and talking to themselves. He enjoyed himself. It was really lonely to be alone. When Lisa heard this, she frowned and remained silent for a long time. Just when Xiaoqian thought that she was going to avoid the question, she said in a low voice, "At that time, I didn't know what loneliness was. I only knew that I had to stay until the end. I was the only one who had a chance to survive." She turned her head and asked with the same seriousness, "Have you killed anyone before?" Xiaoqian's heart sank. He shook his head. I don't think so." "Oh." Lisa lowered her head and looked at the grilled fish on the barbed wire fence. She said calmly, "I killed someone who I used to think of as my best friend with my own hands." She had never mentioned this to anyone before. Lisa stared at the sizzling fish, but her tone was calm. "At that time, there were only 2 children and me left in the base camp. We were locked in the same cage. I told him that even if we were to die together, I wouldn't do anything to him. He said the same thing to me. At that time, only 1 out of 100 children had the chance to walk out of the cage. When there were only 10 children left, the other 8 children did not dare to do anything to her. Hence, they were prepared to kill the boy. She finally stood up, picked up the knife and killed the 8 children. She walked to him covered in blood, sat down and said to him, 'Only 1 child can walk out of here. Either you die or I die. But I won't kill you. What about you? Will you kill me?' The boy shook his head firmly and said, 'I won't.' Then, Lisa held his hand and smiled at him. 'Even if we die together, don't betray me, okay?' The boy smiled back at her. That night she slept very lightly. She only felt a black shadow walking to her side. Even with her eyes closed, she could feel the dazzling light of the dagger under the moonlight. She opened her eyes and almost subconsciously flipped her hand over to pin the person under her. When she saw his face clearly, she fell to the wall in disappointment. It was him. They had clearly agreed that even if they were to die together, they would not betray each other. However, he chose to betray him and decided to make a move on her in her sleep. The boy nervously held the dagger and stood up, trembling all over. Tears and snot flowed down his face. I had no choice. I had no choice. I didn't want to kill you, but I didn't want to die even more. Oh. Chapter 3662. Lisa narrowed her eyes and pulled out a sharp dagger from her waist belt. She swung it at the nearest person. Ah! Bang bang bang. Gunshots rang out in the basement. However, in less than 10 seconds, the basement returned to its usual deathly silence. The other crew members crept into the storeroom. They were very vigilant as they hugged their guns. When they broke through the door earlier, they kept their guns at a distance and scanned every corner with vigilance. As soon as they entered the room, the fishy smell on their bodies, as well as the sour smell of having drifted on the sea for a month without bathing, immediately filled the air. Seeing that there was no one in the storeroom, the group of people put away their guns and began rummaging through the cabinets. The pirates were here for the treasure. Seeing that there was no one on the ship, their first reaction was probably to escape on a small speedboat. Therefore, they quickly searched for any valuables left on the yacht. The door of the cabinet suddenly opened. Everyone immediately became alert. Before they could raise their guns, an unknown grenade was suddenly thrown out. The group of people looked at each other and glanced at each other curiously. However, the flash grenade exploded all of a sudden. Poof! In such a small room, the flash grenade exploded all of a sudden. The strong sense of dazzling light blinded everyone's eyes. Shit! It's a grenade! While the group of people were wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves, Mui-chen, who was wearing a pair of goggles, flipped out of the cabinet with an M4A1. He knelt on one knee and fired a series of shots at the crowd. Da-da-da! In an instant, a large number of corpses fell on the floor. Mui-chen stood up and walked over. He examined the corpses one by one. Those who were still moving their eyeballs were shot directly in between their eyebrows. The other people in the cabins on the second floor heard the gunshots from the storeroom on the first floor. They looked at each other and immediately rushed to the storeroom. They waved the smoke away and walked in to take a look. There was a river of blood. What's going on? The group of people obviously did not expect such an unforeseen event. Just as they were panicking, the ceiling of the storage room was suddenly pulled open, and a Gatling gun poked in. Lisa crouched on top of the roof and aimed her Gatling gun at the cabin. She fired at the cabin. Da-da-da-da. A few minutes later, the world returned to silence. After meeting with Xiaoyi-chen, Lisa carefully stepped into the room. She held the dagger in her hand and examined the corpse on the floor. At that moment, the smell of blood in the room was extremely thick. The two of them looked at each other. After confirming that all the pirates had been killed, Lisa and Xiaoyi-chen put away their daggers and left the cabin, locking the door behind them. At night, Xiaoyi-chen and Lisa dragged all the corpses to the deck. After making sure that there was no one left behind, they threw the corpses into the sea. Lisa wore a diving suit and dived into the sea. After cleaning up all the corpses on the propeller, Lisa climbed onto the yacht and gestured to the cockpit. Xiaoyi-chen pushed the starting lever, and the propeller was successfully restored. She then heaved a sigh of relief. Using the radio, Lisa sent out a distress signal. Looking at the route map, she saw that the storm was still ongoing. She had a headache and held her forehead. I wonder when the storm will pass. Chapter 3663. Lisa shook her head. No, I won't. Not all of the corpses of the pirates were thrown into the sea. One of them was left hanging by the railing as a warning to the pirates that if they dared to block the way, they would definitely die. Just as Xiaoyi-chen was in a daze, he suddenly heard a sound. Upon hearing the sound, Lisa immediately sat up and threw herself in front of the screen. She took a look and exclaimed in surprise. Someone responded to my radio. There's a ship not far from us. You sent a radio just now. Were you asking for help? Yes. But with our fuel, food, and drinking water, we should be able to last until we reach our destination. Lisa turned around and suddenly asked, Then have you considered whether our small yacht will have enough emergency equipment if we encounter a storm on such a big sea? Xiaoyi-chen was suddenly speechless. Moreover, there are only two of us. Our abilities are limited. Even though we have enough fuel and food and water, if we encounter another storm on the sea, the fuel will be depleted very quickly and we may not have enough. Also, the yacht's speed is limited. Xiaoqian nodded. Okay, I understand. I'll listen to you. Okay. Lisa immediately sent a distress signal to a passing ship. The other party replied that they were willing to help. Lisa's confidence was greatly boosted. After confirming the location of the radar, she steered the yacht closer to the ship. For the past few hours they had been on high alert and did not relax at all. Hence, it was inevitable that they were a little tired. Muichen in particular was exhausted. Lisa immediately urged him, "Go and sleep for a while. I'll keep watch." Xiaoqian asked worriedly, "Aren't you tired?" "I'm tired, but I can hold on." Lisa smiled. "Don't worry, I can hold on. You, on the other hand, should get some rest. Who knows, you might take over after a short nap." "Okay." Xiaoqian didn't waste any time, but he didn't return to his room. Instead, he laid down in the cockpit, leaned against the wall, hugged his arms, and fell asleep very quickly. When he woke up again, he was shaken awake by Lisa. "Muichen, wake up." He opened his eyes in a daze and saw Lisa's nervous expression. "What's wrong?" He sat up warily, thinking that something had happened again. Lisa said to him, "Do you still remember the ship that we sent a distress signal to?" Right now, he's about 1,000 meters away from us." "But..." Lisa, on the other hand, began to hesitate. Muichen saw her cold expression and could not help but worry. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" "That's the Gu family's cargo ship." "Oh." Xiaoqian was stunned. There was no deep hatred between the Mu family and the Gu family. However, Lisa did. Previously, her subordinates had killed all the men that Gu Jinglian had brought to North Africa. There were so many blood debts. Now they had bumped into each other head-on. She didn't dare to board the ship. Xiaoqian took the binoculars from her and looked in the direction that Lisa was pointing at. Indeed, it was a huge cargo ship. The ship's bow was engraved with a huge Werther symbol. That was the Gu family's factory in North Africa. Chapter 3664. There's no room for hesitation. Muichen said. Although Gu Jinglian is ruthless, he will never lay a hand on children. Lisa was a little skeptical. "Are you sure?" Muichen patted his chest and assured her. "Yes, I'm sure." He still believed in Gu Jinglian's character. He would never make things difficult for the two children. Half an hour later, Lisa regretted her decision. After boarding the boat, Gu Jinglian saw Muichen and Lisa. Without a word, he ordered his men to handcuff the two of them and tie them to the pillar of the boat. Gu Jinglian stood in front of them condescendingly. His cold gaze swept over every inch of their bodies, as though they were being dismembered. Lisa asked angrily, "Didn't you say that Gu Jinglian wouldn't lay a hand on children?" Muichen was so embarrassed that the corners of his lips twitched violently. Gu Jinglian was wearing a black uniform. When he heard Lisa's words, he squatted down calmly and sized them up expressionlessly. "Oh? Who was the one who said that I wouldn't make things difficult for children?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his wrist. In his hand was a desert eagle. He aimed it between Muichen's eyebrows. "Gongfan, what goes around comes around. I didn't expect that you would fall into my hands." When Muichen heard this, he shuddered. He hurriedly said, "Young Master Gu, you've misunderstood. My name is Muichen, not Yu. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he raised his eyebrows but did not think much of it. "What makes you think that I'll believe you? Yu and I are twins. The two of us look very similar, but there are definitely differences. For example, I'm a little taller, a little more skilled, and a little smarter. Yu is a little more stupid, a little more eccentric, and a little more annoying." Lisa rolled her eyes at Muichen. At the critical moment, he really didn't feel guilty about selling out his own brother. "You scammed me just like that." He was a maniac who cheated his brother. Muichen seemed to have guessed what she was thinking. He turned his head and said angrily, "That's right. Why should you pay for his debt?" Gu Jinglian thought that this little guy was a little interesting. He didn't really want to kill the two children. Just as Muichen had said, no matter how ruthless Gu Jinglian was, he would not lay his hands on the two children. This was not his style of doing things. However, He had been so miserably tricked by the hurricane in North Africa that he could not let this matter rest. Furthermore, Gu Jinglian really thought that Muichen was Yun Tianyu, so he wanted to tease him. Seeing Gu Jinglian's cold gaze on him, Muichen immediately said, "Master Gu, are you sure you want to kill us? My daddy is not to be trifled with. If you dare to do anything and something happens to me, my daddy will be very angry. My mommy will also fight it out with you." Gu Jinglian could not help but ask coldly, "You said that you're good at fighting. Let's have a spar. If you're really that good, I'll let you off and bring you back to the capital safe and sound. What do you think?" "Spar with you?" Gu Jinglian smiled gracefully. "I don't fight." "Xiaoyichen." Lisa could not help asking, "Who will you spar with then?" Gu Jinglian stood up and snapped his fingers. Hanji. Chapter 3665. Xiaoyichen gulped. To be honest, if he were to fight with such a big guy, would his head be smashed into pieces with a single punch? Gu Jinglian smiled. "If you admit defeat, I'll throw you both back into the sea." Lisa immediately said, "I'll fight him." Gu Jinglian smiled and said, "If you fight, it'll be considered as admitting defeat." He was well aware of Lisa's capabilities. Even though she was small in stature, she would definitely have the upper hand against Han Ji. However, this was Muichen. He had long heard that Muyaja had 2 sons. Among them, the eldest was the most skilled. He would like to experience it for himself. After a pause, he turned to look at Muichen and said meaningfully, "As a man, surely you wouldn't let your girl fight, right?" Lisa's face turned red when she heard this. She stammered, What are you talking about? Who's his girl?" Xiaoyichen said disdainfully, "Do you think I'm afraid? Untie me and I'll fight him." When Gu Jinglian heard this, he couldn't help but look at him in a different light. He gestured with his eyes and his subordinate immediately walked over to untie Muichen. Muichen stood up and moved his wrists and restraints a little before he got into a fighting stance. Lisa saw this and said worriedly, "Muichen, don't force yourself. I'll be fine, don't worry." Muichen snorted coldly and turned to look at Han Ji. He gestured provocatively at him with his finger and said, "Go ahead." Han Ji saluted with his fists clenched. When he clenched his fists, his sandbag-sized fists immediately produced a crisp and powerful sound. Xiaoyichen didn't back down at all. He got into a fighting stance. His stance was a standard fighting stance. Gu Jinglian retreated to one side. With a cigarette in his mouth, he watched the fight coldly. "Ha!" Han Ji hollered, raised his fist, and pounced on Muichen like a wolf. His 1.95-meter-tall figure was like Mount Tai as he leaned over. Like a ghost, little Yichen nimbly dodged the attack and appeared behind him. With a leap he aimed a horizontal kick at the man's ribs. With his back facing Xiaoyichen, Han Ji grabbed onto his leg tightly. Xiaoyichen was shocked. He wanted to break free, but there was no chance for him to do so. In a flash, he bounced up from the ground and swept his other leg towards Han Ji's face like a whirlwind. Bang! A kick. Xiaoyichen's flying kick landed squarely on Han Ji's face, and he couldn't help but stumble back a few meters. Xiaoyichen nimbly landed on the ground, but his left knee went soft. He immediately realized that Han Ji had used too much strength to hold on to him, and that his ankle was cramping. Without sufficient exercise, it was indeed a bit difficult to face them head-on. Han Ji was also pushed back a few steps. He didn't expect the little guy, who was only waist-high, to have such explosive strength. His jaw almost dislocated. Han Ji spat out a mouthful of blood. His teeth were obviously loosened. He wiped away the traces of blood at the corner of his mouth and got into a fighting stance again. "You're not bad either," Muichen said with a smile. His words were undoubtedly a form of provocation. Han Ji smiled and taunted back. "Little guy, you're not bad." Xiaoyichen didn't humbly admit defeat. He said coldly, "Ha! It's not too late to admit defeat now." Chapter 3666. As Han Ji spoke, he clenched his fists tightly and glared at Xiaoyichen. His eyes were like those of a venomous snake. Xiaoyichen lightly scratched the tip of his nose and charged at him. The two of them exchanged punches with each other. Their fists were not to be trifled with. They were solid fists. When their fists landed on the wall almost cracked and a layer of dust fell off. However, the most shocking thing was that Xiao Chen did not show any signs of weakness. Instead, he seemed to be getting more and more courageous. He kept throwing punches at Han Ji's vital points. Compared to Han Ji, although he was slimmer, he had the advantage in terms of agility. He was as nimble as a cat. Gradually, Muichin understood what was going on. He could not use too many fancy moves against Han Ji. Hence, he gave up on horizontal kicks, flying kicks, and high kicks. Regardless of whether he threw punches or kicks, he relied on his brute strength. Xiao Chen's strength was far beyond Han Ji's expectations. Who would have thought that a mere child would actually have such great capabilities? Han Ji was not soft either. He threw a punch at Xiao Chen's shoulder. Xiao Chen did not dodge. Instead, he clenched his fist and met Han Ji's fist head-on. The two of them clashed and separated. Xiao Chen and Han Ji both took a few steps back. Their faces showed signs of pain. At that moment, Lisa's heart trembled. She looked anxiously at Xiao Chen. She saw that the bones in Xiao Chen's fist were slightly red. Then, she looked at Han Ji's hand and saw that a few bones had been broken. Lisa turned pale with fright. Han Ji's fist was as big as a red bean bun. In the end, he did not expect that little Li Chen would take his punch head-on and even break his bones. Lisa suddenly felt that Xiao Chen's strength was too frightening. He had hidden his strength well. Perhaps in terms of skill she was slightly better than Xiao Chen, but in terms of strength there was a huge difference. Han Ji's fighting skills weren't too complicated, but each of his punches and kicks were very solid. However, neither Han Ji nor Gu Jinglian expected that Xiao Chen's tiny body would contain such immense power. Unbelievable. Han Ji's hand was injured and a few of his bones were broken, but he didn't care. He stood up and prepared to continue fighting. Gu Jinglian suddenly said, "Stand down." "Young Master Gu." Han Ji looked nervously at Gu Jinglian, only to see him sizing up Muichin with admiration. Han Ji immediately emphasized, "I haven't lost yet." Losing to a child was a great humiliation. Han Ji refused to admit that he had lost to Xiao Chen. Gu Jinglian said coldly, "According to the rules, you've already lost. Getting injured meant losing. Moreover, Xiao Chen was still a child." Gu Jinglian knew in his heart that after such a contest, if he hadn't stopped the fight, Han Ji would have been beaten to a pulp by Xiao Chen. Forget it. The contest would end here. Gu Jinglian walked in front of Muichin and smiled. "Muichin, you've really opened my eyes." Xiao Chen looked up at him and asked curiously, "Did I win?" "Yes, you won." "Then since I won, you can't go back on your promise." Gu Jinglian said disdainfully, "I never go back on my words." Chapter 3667. He cut the ropes and unlocked the handcuffs at the same time. Lisa regained her freedom and immediately walked over to Xiao Chen. She asked worriedly, "Are you okay?" Xiao Chen looked at Lisa and saw that she was pretending to be calm, but she could not hide the anxiety in her eyes. His heart warmed and he immediately smiled. "Yeah, I'm fine." She was worried about him. He did not expect that Lisa, who was usually so cold, would take the initiative to show concern for others. "That big guy hit you so hard. Are you sure you're okay?" Lisa was in disbelief. Han Ji had punched him so many times. Did he not feel any pain or itch? She had seen Han Ji punch Xiao Chen's back and abdomen a few times. The force of those punches was enough to break a steel plate, let alone a human body. Xiao Chen was immortal after all. Lisa did not believe that he was completely fine. "I'm really fine. Don't worry, I won't force myself." The little guy smiled warmly. So, Lisa was skeptical, but she still had some doubts. "Even if your bones weren't broken and your organs weren't damaged, I don't believe that you don't have any bruises after being hit by such a heavy punch." Xiao Chen calmly lifted his shirt and revealed his muscular abdomen. Lisa took a look and was surprised to find that there was not a single bruise. It was too amazing. Lisa's eyes were filled with shock. How could this be? "I learned Chinese martial arts." Ancient martial arts were Chinese martial arts, and Chinese martial arts was also a term used to refer to martial arts. However, in the current traditional sense, Chinese martial arts and martial arts were very different. Martial arts practitioners strengthened the body, while Chinese martial arts practitioners protected the family and defended the country. The so-called Chinese martial arts were martial arts that only killed the enemy and did not perform. For example, Tai Chi was one of the Chinese martial arts. However, Tai Chi had been prejudiced by many people. They thought that Tai Chi could be practiced by any ordinary person. Other than strengthening the body, it had no other use. Now, Tai Chi had become a form of performance. However, the martial arts of Tai Chi did not have so many mysterious and strange moves. His attacks were nothing more than fast, accurate, and ruthless. If he could kill in one move, he would never use two. Taking someone's life was only a matter of a snap of a finger. His leg and hand strength came from practicing the horse stance. The horse stance was the foundation of many sections. The horse stance of each sect was similar, but there were differences. There were only two purposes for practicing the horse stance. One was to train the strength of the legs, and the other was to train internal energy, which was the so-called gathering of qi. Therefore, although the horse stance seemed simple, it was one of the most basic skills in martial arts. In Chinese martial arts there was a saying, "Start by standing in the stance for 3 years." If one did not practice martial arts, it would be for naught. If one only had a set of moves without a solid foundation, it would only be for show and not practical. Shaoqian had a master when he was 3 years old and practiced the horse stance every day. In the beginning, he found it boring and thought that the horse stance was too easy. However, the horse stance became more and more difficult with each passing day. Later on, when little Chen was in the horse stance, his master magically placed a basin of charcoal under his crotch. Following that, he took 2 hanging stones from the side, each weighing about 5 kilograms, and hung them on his arms just like that. Whenever he moved, his clothes would be set on fire. Chapter 3668. He had to maintain this stance for the time it takes to burn a joss stick. The time it takes to burn a joss stick. He had to maintain this posture for the entire time it takes to burn a joss stick. Shaoqian's expression was bitter and vengeful. Would he still be alive after he was done? Furthermore, there was another rule. The stone was not allowed to fall to the ground. If it did, he would be punished for the time it takes to burn a joss stick. The stone was only a finger's length away from the ground. If he let his guard down, he would collide with the ground. Hence, Shaoqian spent the time it takes to burn 4 joss sticks on the first day. That night, he could not even walk smoothly. With this kind of training, coupled with Shaoqian's extraordinary talent, his strength was unparalleled even though he was not tall. Mu Yaja sometimes suspected that his son had extraordinary strength. If the car broke down when they went out to play, this guy would probably be able to lift the car with his bare hands even without a jack. Lisa heard this and was so shocked that she could not close her mouth. However, even though Shaoqian had said so, Lisa was still worried. She grabbed his hand and reached out to touch Shaoqian's abdomen gently. These were the places where Hanji had hit him just now. She felt around and confirmed that the 2 punches didn't hurt any of his organs or bones. It was the luckiest of the luckiest. However, Shaoqian was so embarrassed by her touch that he took a few steps back. Blushing, he looked at her. Why are you touching me?" Seeing that his little face was completely red, Lisa explained in a speechless manner, "I'm checking your body to see if there's anything wrong with it." Shaoqian's face turned even redder. He said awkwardly, "You should be wondering if his hand was broken when he punched me. It's fine. You don't have to worry about me." Lisa looked at him speechlessly. After a long silence, she suddenly said, "I'm going to send a message to Master Jia." With that, she walked around him and left. Shaoqian then realized that he had to contact his uncle as soon as possible and tell him that they were on the Gu family's boat. Gu Jinglian had promised him that he would bring them back to the capital safe and sound. According to Lisa, the speed of this cargo ship was twice as fast as the yacht. They would reach the capital in about 10 days. Meanwhile, when Gong Jie received the news that Shaoqian and Lisa had boarded the rescue boat and were on their way back to the capital, he heaved a sigh of relief. However, when he heard that the 2 of them were on Gu Jinglian's boat, he was shocked. Gong Jie was utterly confused. The hurricane group had taken away the Gu family's land in North Africa. Now that they had met, could it be, Gu Jinglian must be making things difficult for these 2 little guys? "Uncle, let me tell you, I've defeated a super strong big guy. This person is Gu Jinglian's very capable bodyguard. He lost to me." Shaoqian was so proud of himself when he mentioned this. Gongjia was not in the mood to listen to this. He was only happy to see that they were safe. Lisa said, "We were hijacked by pirates not long ago." Hijacked? Yes, near the waters of Somalia. They boarded the boat? Yes. Then, Gongjia asked worriedly, "Are you guys hurt?" No. Lisa smiled coldly. Xiaoqian and I killed all the people who boarded the boat. Not a single one was left. Gongjia. Why did he feel a chill down his spine and a chill run down his spine? Chapter 3669. Xiaoqian had spent the past few days on the cruise ship counting on his fingers. He wholeheartedly hoped that the day he could reunite with his family would come soon. He really missed home. Lisa knew that Xiaoqian missed home all the time, especially when he was under hypnosis and the hypnosis had failed. How strong must his willpower have been to resist such a terrifying hypnosis technique? Xiaoqian had done what Yu couldn't. She couldn't help but look at him in a different light. After 2 weeks of sailing, they finally reached home. When Xiaoqian found out that they would reach the harbor in the capital the next morning, he was over the moon. That night he couldn't sleep. He didn't know how long he had been away from home. He also didn't know if Yu had gotten along well with Mommy and Daddy, and if he had regained his memory after returning to the Mu family. In the middle of the night, Lisa woke up to find that the bed next to hers was empty. Xiaoqian wasn't there. She got up and went to the deck. She saw Xiaoqian leaning against the railing and looking out at the horizon. The harbor in the capital was on the other side. That was the direction of his home. His home. Xiaoqian kept looking in that direction. Lisa walked over and teased him. "What's wrong? You're so excited that you can't sleep because you're going home?" Xiaoqian didn't answer. Instead, he said in a trembling voice, "Lisa, do you know? In 6 hours I'll be able to see Mommy." Lisa suddenly fell silent. "It's not just Mommy. There's also Daddy Yu Yao." A blissful smile appeared on Xiaoqian's face as he spoke. Lisa was affected by his emotions and smiled from the bottom of her heart. "Are you that homesick?" "Yes." Lisa also put her arm on the railing and asked curiously, "Mui-chen, what does it feel like to have a home?" Mui-chen was a little surprised that Lisa would ask such a question. To the Lisa of the past, this question was incomparably childish. But now she actually took the initiative to ask. He was a little curious, but he was also seriously considering how to answer this question. "I can't describe it, but it feels very warm." "Warmth?" Lisa could not help but laugh. It was a vague answer. Xiaoqian said, "I love it when Mommy reads me bedtime stories. I love lying in her arms and listening to her gentle voice. My mommy's voice is the best voice in the world. Listening to her voice, I was able to fall asleep peacefully. Speaking of which, I can't remember all the stories she told me, but I really like that feeling. I never had any nightmares again when I listened to her voice while I slept." Lisa was a little entranced as she listened. When Xiaoqian suddenly stopped, she asked curiously, "What else?" "Also," Xiaoqian smiled and said, "every time I made a mistake or you pushed the blame to me, you know that. Yu is my younger brother, so I have to give in to him. But even if Mommy is angry, she won't be fierce to me. If she's really sad, she'll definitely be so angry that she'll cry. I'm so afraid of seeing her sad, so I keep telling myself that I can't make her cry. Otherwise, I'll be committing a huge sin." "Okay. Also, my daddy warned me before." Chapter 3670. Ha 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 ha. Lisa was amused by his animated expression. "Your daddy is so adorable." "My daddy? Him. He's alright." In Xiaoqian's mind, Muyaja was not adorable at all. It was too scary to use the word adorable to describe him. "My daddy is very fierce. When I was young, I was afraid of him. He always had a serious expression on his face and didn't smile much. At that time, I wondered how there could be such a difficult person in the world." After pausing for a moment, Xiaoqian suddenly smiled and continued, "Later on, I understood that it wasn't that he didn't love me, he just didn't know how to express it. After he got together with Mommy, he gradually learned how to get along with me." As Lisa listened, she gently yawned. "Lisa, to be honest, I feel that it's such a pity." "A pity?" Xiaoqian turned around and gazed deeply at her. "When you were born, there was only killing in your world. Without daddy to hug you and mommy to dote on you, you even missed out on your childhood. Don't you feel lonely without a childhood? Little Chen lamented. If you had a mommy like me, who reads you bedtime stories, dresses you in pretty dresses, and dotes on you like the apple of her eye, you'd surely be blissful. Lisa's expression was slightly startled. Chen also realized that his words might have hurt her. His expression darkened and he said, "Sorry. Did I say something I shouldn't have?" Lisa, however, turned to smile. No. There was a long silence between the two children. Lisa suddenly sighed and said, "It's just that you seem to have said something wrong." Lisa looked up at Chen and said slowly, "How can I miss out on something that I've never had?" Chen was stunned. For a moment he was speechless. "I've never had that thing, so you said that I missed out on it and felt that it was a pity. However, I don't feel that way. It's just that." She was just a little envious after hearing Chen say so much. Just as Chen had said, if she had a mother like you and Chen, she would definitely be very happy. Just because you didn't have it in the past doesn't mean you won't in the future. Chen immediately patted his chest and said, "From now on, my home is your home. My mommy is your mommy, and my daddy is your daddy." "Really?" Lisa asked jokingly. "Will your wife be my wife from now on?" Chen immediately blushed and snapped, "You don't even like women. In any case, since you've said so, from now on what's yours is mine. We've already agreed." Lisa stuck out her little finger and asked curiously, "I heard that you guys make such promises. This is called a retractor." "Yes, pinky swear." Lisa cleared her throat and said, "You have to promise me." Chen laughed and looked at her. He shook his head and said, "Okay, I'll pinky swear with you." He stuck out his little finger and hooked it with hers. "Pinky swear." "Okay, pinky swear." The night breeze was getting stronger. Lisa went back to bed and pulled the blanket over her. She didn't know why, but she had new expectations for tomorrow. "Lisa, wake up." Lisa slowly woke up from her dream. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw Chen's excited expression. "We're here. We're almost at the harbor."